Howdy folks, welcome to version 1 of the A Plus practice questions. As you can see on the screen, these practice questions are for 220-1102, which is also known as Core 2 of the A Plus course. So this is the 1100 series, but it's also the 1102 course specifically. Now, even though these questions were made with the 1100 A plus series in mind, they will, however, also work with helping you prepare for any other newer version of the A plus exam that gets released after this course. At the end of the day, it's generally still the same objectives that you get tested on, and it's the same skills and all that as well. Now, folks, just a heads up, the practice questions in this video is not the actual questions from the official exam. My questions do, however, cover you on the same objectives and they measure you on the same skills. Alrighty, before we jump into our first question, if you haven't done it already, do your homie a favor and boink that like button. It helps the video and it also helps the channel out a lot when you guys do that. Basically, more people out there will be able to find this video that actually needs study material, so you'll be helping other people out there. If you yourself would like to know when I make more content, well, maybe consider subscribing too. Now that we have all that mumbo jumbo out of the way, let's start with question 1. You have a company who is a client of yours. They want to reuse an old hard drive, but before they do, they want to erase all the old data on it first. What is the best way to do that? Now, guys, in real life, there's many ways you can go about that, but the exam will not always give you the possible answers you're looking for in real life. So you're going to have to go with, well, what's the best that they give you? So the first option they say is to do a quick format. Now, quick format, it might appear like everything on a hard drive is blank, but let me tell you guys, it is not. A quick format is actually very easy to go and recover the data. Everything and anything that was on a hard drive is still 100% recoverable. So when you go and format a hard drive, nothing is actually ever gone. Everything is still exactly where it was. You simply just erase the reference for that stuff. So it's actually very easy to go and recover that. So we most certainly do not want to go and do a quick format if we want to go and use that hard drive for something else, because you never know. If that person is a little clever, they might know how to go and recover the data, and before you know it, you've got a data breach. Answer B there says deleting all the files using command line interface. That's the same as doing the format. Quite frankly, deleting it via command line is actually a heck of a lot more work. You're just doing a lot more work for yourself and doing it via command prompt. And doing it via command prompt is actually not going to allow you to go and erase the whole hard drive, unless, of course, this is a secondary draft that you're using. So it's quite limited. I would not recommend B. I mean, at this point in time, A looks better than B. Answer C says disk wiping software. Now, in my opinion, that actually happens to be the answer in this case. D says reinstalling Windows. No, that's not going to do anything. All the data is still there. Before you can go and reinstall Windows, you still need to go and wipe it. So D is not going to do anything. The answer is not A, it's not B, it's not D. The answer is C. Now, in real life, guys, the correct way to go and do this would be to go and use some sort of disk overwriting software or something like that. But you do get disk wiping software, which is going to basically make it impossible or nearly impossible to go and recover any data. Generally, as a rule of thumb, if you do need to go and reuse a drive, you only reuse it in your own company in the same department. We don't generally go and give out these drives and use them somewhere else in the company or even outside the company. Definitely not, because you never know. Someone might be clever enough to be able to recover the data from there. If we are going to go and get rid of a drive, like completely get rid of it, like throw it in the trash, the best ways to dispose of it would be to go and take an industrial drill, the kind that you go and drill holes in the wall with, and you drill a couple of holes through that hard drive. Alternatively, you can go and use an incineration, melt it down to molten metal. You can go and use an industrial shredder that shreds it, basically like a paper shredder, rips the hard drive to bits and pieces. Or you can go and do deguzzing. It's kind of like going to send like a magnetic pulse through the hard drive, erasing it and corrupting all the data. I don't really recommend deguzzing. It's not as effective as some people might think. There's always a chance that one or two files might not have gotten corrupted, and before you know it, you've got a data breach. So the answer, guys, here is disk wiping software. Moving on to question 2. You have a user who installed an application on their device that claims to optimize performance. The user says they installed this application directly from the vendor's website. The device now has extremely high network utilization. What should you do first? Now you'll notice that in the exam this is going to happen as well, where they'll mention certain words in capital letters. You'll see there I went and highlighted the word first in capital letters. So the word first is something they like to do in the exam, and they also like to use the word best. Best, first, or least. So just be careful for those words. They're trying to draw your attention, which is what I'm trying to do here as well. So if I say the word first in capital letters, that means there is a possibility there might be more than one correct answer here. I want to see, or they want to see, if you know which one is the more correct one out of the lot here. All right, so in a nutshell, the user went and installed some sort of shady looking application from the vendor's website, or at least it claims to come from the vendor's website. But now after doing so, they notice there's a lot of high network utilization. So the computer is using a lot of network data and all that kinds of stuff. What should you do first? So the first answer here says unplug a network cable or turn off the Wi-Fi, depending on how this machine is connected to the network. Is it connected via cable or via wireless? So in short, just disconnect it from the network. Answer B says uninstall the suspicious application that this user now obviously went and installed. I don't know, that sounds pretty plausible in my opinion. C says increase the data plan limits. I can't see how that's going to solve the problem. And yes, you might have more data now, assuming you were on a data plan limit of some kind, but it's not going to solve the problem. It's just going to kick the can down further down the road, assuming you had a data plan to begin with. If you had no data plan, well, that's not going to make any difference then. The last answer says reset the device to factory spec. Now that might get the problem solved, but it's a little drastic. Very, very drastic, because the user might lose everything. I see them mentioning nothing here about backing up and all that, so that is a little extreme. So I'm going to go with B here, uninstall the suspicious application. Now, that's probably not going to be your last step, but it's going to be your first step here. There might be additional steps involved here, so once you've done that, you're probably going to end up installing an antivirus if the user has none, updating antivirus if it's not up to date, doing a scan or two if they haven't done that already. But your first step here, guys, would be to remove that shady application. All right, let's move on to question 3. One of your clients calls you and says none of the files on their PC seem to open. They do, however, see a program or a window on their desktop which is asking for payment in exchange for file access. What should you do first? You see what I mean by the word first? There it is again. So that means there is a possibility once again that there may or may not be more than one answer. We saw previously in question 2 there was 2 answers that was kind of correct. The one was just a little extreme, and it may or may not apply here as well. So what should we do first? So they can't access their files, and there's some sort of window displaying on the computer saying they need to go and pay first before they can access their files. What does that sound like? Depending on how much experience you guys have, you might already know what the answer is. So A says scan and remove the malware. So we have a suspicion this might be some sort of malware. So A, it's plausible. B says disable system restore. And that's not going to do anything. That is something you should go and do, in your recovery process, but it's not the first thing you're going to go and do. C says quarantine that system. Yes, that sounds very plausible. D, schedule automated anti-malware scans. I mean, this should have already been done. So I don't disagree with the fact that we need to go and do some sort of malware scan. It's probably going to be a scan between A and D. I would say A, if we had to go and do a scan. But the first thing you need to go and do, you'll notice the word first is in capital, is to quarantine that system, because we don't know what that system has. In this case, I can tell you guys it's ransomware. That's normally a symptom of ransomware. Everything on a system gets encrypted, and unless you or the user pay some sort of ransom in the form of cryptocurrency, it's normally Bitcoin or Ethereum or however you want to go and pronounce that. Unless you pay that, your data is not going to get released. So the first thing you want to do is you want to quarantine that system from the network. If it's plugged into a network cable, you unplug that. If it's connected to a wireless network, you disconnect from that wireless network. But I actually want to go and recommend you take it a step further. Just disconnecting from the wireless network doesn't really do much, because it can always go and auto connect back. So after disconnecting, tell that laptop, tablet, or phone to forget that network. That means it doesn't remember what the password is, and if it tries to auto connect back, it ain't gonna work. Another extra step I would recommend you go and take is remove it out of that environment. Never mind unplugging it and turning it off, remove it. It doesn't help much. You leave that laptop or that desktop in that office or wherever it might be. You go away, and maybe a day later or so, another person comes in there and they're like, oh, gee golly, why is this machine unplugged? And then they go and plug it back in, and before you know it, you've got a massive problem. So do not leave it there. Go and hide it somewhere in your office, or go lock it in the server room or whatever. Just do not leave it there, because you never know. Someone might not know exactly what's going on, and they're going to go and plug it back in, and then you're going to have real problems. Moving on to question 4. One of your clients is a company that is issuing laptops to their users which are allowed to be taken out of the office. Ooh, that sounds nice. They need to ensure that data is secure in case a device is lost or if it's stolen. Which of the following is the best solution? So this is great. I mean, the laptops are being issued. These people are allowed to go and take them out of the office, all hunky-dory, sunshine and rainbows. But what if one day one of these users misplaces that device or it gets stolen? So companies, you'll find, is normally not too concerned with the device itself, because normally it's under the company's insurance. There's some sort of insurance involved. But the concern here is the data that might be on that device. It might be sensitive. So we don't want sensitive information of the company getting into the wrong hands. What would be the best solution for that? Now, looking at the available answers we've got here, the first one is BitLocker. For those of you not familiar with BitLocker, that is something you'll find on Windows. It's generally only available on the professional and the enterprise editions of Windows. So that's the higher tier editions, the more expensive editions. It basically goes and encrypts the whole laptop, desktop, or external drive. So in this case, it's laptops. If you were to go and use BitLocker, it would encrypt that whole laptop's hard drive. So in that situation, if you were to have used that and the laptop gets lost or misplaced or stolen, and someone happens to get their hands on it, the information on that laptop is inaccessible because it's encrypted. You need to have the key or something, whatever has encrypted this laptop. Without that, you're not going to be able to access it. So BitLocker is very plausible, I must say. B says remote wipe. There's various ways we can go about doing that. The most famous way and the most common way is in most cases to go and use something called Microsoft's Intune. Not something you need to worry about at this point in time, but it's something called Intune. Yes, it could theoretically wipe that device, but the issue of that is, like a phone and a tablet and a laptop, if that device is not on a wireless network or a mobile network of some kind, it cannot receive the instruction to go and wipe itself. And what is the first thing a criminal will go and do if they steal your tablet or your phone or something? They turn it off, and if it has a SIM card in it, they're also going to remove the SIM card. So it's physically impossible for that device to receive the instruction to go and wipe itself, which is a big concern. So in this case, BitLocker is still the best answer. C says, if you look at answer C, locator apps. Also not going to work in my opinion, because the first thing they do, like I said, is to go and remove it from any form of network. And if it doesn't have a GPS on or any network, it's not going to be able to go and tell you where it is. That's why I'm not a big fan of these apps that allow you to find your iPhone or your Android phone or whatever, because in most cases they don't actually work. So, I mean, if they do work, then you consider yourself very lucky. The last option here says a screen lock. That's not very effective, guys. So the answer here is BitLocker, to encrypt the information. We actually do the same thing of external drives, just FYI. So if someone has an external drive that happens to be used for company purposes, and it happens to have company sensitive information on it, it's a great idea to go and encrypt that hard drive, so that if and when it's lost or misplaced, the information is inaccessible to anyone other than the owner of the hard drive. Moving on to question 5, boys and girls. You receive a call from a user who asks you how they can go about updating their Windows machine. Which of the following should you do? So the first answer we've got here says get the user to consider using an iPad. I suppose. I don't know. That's if you're trying to force them down another path. Second answer says have them text you their password. I don't know, man. That sounds very unsecure. C says advise them to wait for a patch to take place automatically. And the last one here says tell the user to click the search field. So that's the search little bar at the bottom left of most computers. So if you're looking at Windows 10 or 11, it'll probably be the bottom left. Click on search. And once they've gone and clicked on search, they need to go and type in check for updates. So you're basically teaching a man to fish. Teach a man to fish and they'll be able to fish for the rest of their lives, and that's what's going to happen here. The answer is D, guys. So you're going to tell that user, go to search. On Windows 11, it might have to be in a different place. So the point is, you tell them go to search. Once they get to search, you tell them to go type in check for updates, and that machine would then proceed to go check for updates automatically. Question 6. Out of the following, which would you say is the most important concern an IT person would have in a data center? Looking at the possible answers, guys, toner disposal. So what is toner? That is powder ink for laser printers. A printer is not something you would generally find in a data center, and toner is definitely also not something you're going to find lying around. So that's completely irrelevant to the question. So it's definitely not A. B says electrostatic discharge mats. Now, I would say discharge is a bit of a concern in data centers, but mats is not something we normally go and use there. So that's referring back to the fact that the human body's got enough static electricity in it to blow circuitry like motherboards, RAM chips, and any form of circuit board, basically, really. So rubber mats is something we would go and put underneath our chairs and underneath the actual computer itself if we're working on a computer like a desktop computer. It's not something we generally use in data centers. It's not something you'll find in a data center, so it's not B. C says humidity levels, and that sounds like something plausible to me. And if we look at D, network cable lengths. No. So the answer here, guys, is humidity level. So generally what happens is, especially in server room environments, we always strive for relative humidity of about 50%. You're never going to get perfectly 50%, but you want to try and get it as close as possible to 50%. So if it's about 40, 45, 55, 60, that's all good and well. So you just want to try and get it as close as possible to 50% humidity. Why though? Because if there's no humidity and it's too dry, that's going to cause static. Static is bad because something can go and blow itself. So as soon as you touch something or something touches something else, you're going to have static discharge, and then whammo, something's going to blow. If the humidity is too high, condensation may or may not take place. And you're going to find water droplets are going to form in certain places where they're not supposed to, like circuit boards. And as you guys know, water and circuit boards is not a cool mix. That is not going to end well. It's also going to make a short circuit. It's not good. Moving on to question 7. One of your clients states that their machine did a Windows update and ever since has been opening PDF documents with Microsoft Edge. Which of the following can be used to ensure that PDF documents are opened with Adobe Reader instead? Is it A, Network and Sharing Center? No, that is something you normally go to go and configure something like your network configuration, your IP addresses, your subnet mask, your default gateway, your DNS. That's basically what you're going to go and do there. You can also go and configure things like your VPN connections and what have you. So that's got nothing to do with choosing what program opens what kind of file types. Nothing to do with that. B says default programs. So that actually is the answer here, guys. If you go into your Windows machine, Windows 10 or 11, there's a place you can go to in your settings app. This applies to both Windows 10 and 11. It's not the same way you're going to browse to it, but in both Windows 10 and 11, if you go to your settings app, which is effectively the new control panel, there's a place that says default programs, and in there, you can go and choose what is the default program for whatever file type. So if you, for example, want to open a PDF document, you can go and choose that Adobe Reader should be the default program to open PDF documents. If you want to go and browse the internet, you can go and choose, you know what? I want to make Google's Chrome my default browser. Or I want to make Microsoft Edge my default browser. Or I want to make Mozilla Firefox my default browser. So whatever the file type might be, or whatever the purpose might be, the function might be, you can go and choose what the default program will be for that specific action there. Programs and features, which is answer C, that is where you would go and uninstall programs you don't want installed anymore. You can go also manually install them there, but we don't normally go there to install programs, only to go and uninstall programs. And then you can also go and turn Windows features on and off there, assuming you're an administrator, which most of us normally are. Lastly, add and remove programs. That's pretty much the same thing, guys. So add and remove programs, which sometimes just says remove programs or it just says programs. That and programs and features is kind of sort of one and the same. So if you go to your control panel, the old school control panel, you'll find it sometimes listed as add and remove programs. Other times it just says programs or whatever the case might be. And if you go in there, you'll find there's an option that says programs and features, a sub window, if you want to go and call it that. Moving on to question 8. You need to recommend a backup solution to one of your clients to mitigate ransomware attacks. Which of the following would be best for the client? So first of all, what's ransomware attacks? That's a form of malware that encrypts everything on the user's machine, everything on a server or everything on a network. Depending on whatever was connected, anything and everything that was connected to that network would essentially be encrypted. And you normally have to pay some sort of ransom in the form of cryptocurrency, something like Bitcoin, to be able to unencrypt your data and to gain access back to your data. So what is the best thing to go and do to prepare yourself or the user for something like that? It's not a matter of if it happens, but when it happens. I can guarantee you that all companies and all clients, it will happen at some point in time. It's only a matter of when. And when it happens, are you or that client prepared? So looking at the available answers here, we've got a full backup. I mean, yes, a full backup is obviously very important. The problem with a full backup is it's digitally stored somewhere like on a server. And like I said, anything and everything that was normally plugged in would normally get encrypted. So even if you are smart enough to go make a full backup, which you should always go and do, by the way, that backup is most likely compromised. Answer B says a differential backup. And you'll find that D sounds very much the same there, incremental backup. So incremental and differential backups is basically just going to go and check what has changed since the last backup took place. So normally in any company environment, the very first backup you're going to go and do is a full backup. It's going to take flipping forever to go and do that because it is essentially backing up everything. And once you've got your first and only full backup, it's the only time you're actually going to go and do a full backup in most cases. From that point forward, you'd normally go and do your incremental and differential backups, which is going to go and back up only what has changed since the last backup. So if there's nothing that's changed, nothing gets backed up. If there's new files that's been created, they get backed up. If any files has been edited or changed in any way or any manner, they get backed up. So that's basically what differential incremental backups would go and do. They are, however, still digital backups, and they are, however, usually on the same location. So A, B, and D are all very good backups, and you should definitely do them. But when it comes to ransomware, they are dead in the water. So the only way to get around that is to do off-site backups. Not a lot of companies do off-site backups. And I can't speak for you guys. Maybe your clients does that. But from my experience, the majority of my clients don't do off-site backups. Some of them just don't care. They've got this perception that it's never going to happen to them. Other ones say, you know what, we can't afford it because offsite backups is very expensive, guys. It's very, very expensive. And you get some guys that just don't know how to go and do it. Some companies do an offsite backup, but only do it like once in 6 months. You need to do this as regularly as possible, at least once a week or once a month, not once in 6 months or once in 12 months. Can you honestly tell me you or your client's company can go back 6 months in time? So if you can, you're going to take such a severe knock that that company is going to be crippled. They might even have to go and let some people go. It's not going to be something you want to experience. An offsite backup is a backup that's not plugged in to anything. What I used to go and do, my personal capacity, is I would go and do an offsite backup, and I would go and write the time and a date stamp on that, and that would get sent offsite to an undisclosed location that even I don't know about. And then what I do is an extra precaution is I would go and do another offsite backup, except this one doesn't actually get sent offsite, even though the name says so. It's basically a clone of the one that gets sent offsite. Also a date and timestamp on it, except this one actually gets kept on site. It's locked in an actual safe or a cabinet, but it's not plugged in. So depending on what the disaster is, I will either use the one backup or the other to recover. If it's a huge disaster in the sense of fire, maybe the building burned down, there's a mudslide, earthquake, or a massive robbery, then we'll probably go and use the actual offsite backup. We'll go and retrieve that. But if it's not something like that, and this is maybe just some digital disaster like ransomware, time is money. The quicker you can recover, the more money you're going to save. So in that situation, I would actually resort to using the offsite backup, which is just locked in a safe somewhere, guys. That's actually how we do it in real life, just FYI. Question 9. One of your clients just installed a new backup system. Which of the following types of backups should the client do first? So they've got a backup system installed, and they want to know what kind of backup should you do first. Now here we've got a list. It's basically the exact same options we had in the previous question, question 8. The options have just been mixed around a little bit, but it's essentially the same possible answers. And the previous question, your answer was offsite backup, but that was for a different purpose. It was to prepare you or the client for something like a ransomware attack. But if you or your clients or one of your technicians have just installed a new backup solution, the very first backup you do, and I did give the answer where accidentally in question 8, is a full backup. Your first backup is always a full backup because nothing has been backed up yet. So the first backup will be a full backup. It's going to take forever to do that backup because it is backing up everything. And just in case anyone is wondering what the actual difference between an incremental and a differential backup is, a differential backup is going to go and back up anything and everything that is new or that has changed since the last full backup. Now, in the beginning, right after you did your first full backup, that's not going to be such a big deal. But as time goes by, more and more months pass by, and more years pass by, obviously there's going to be more and more files that's been created, that's been changed. And every time you do a differential backup, yes, it's going to go quicker than a full backup, but it's going to take longer and longer and longer to do it because the difference between all the documents since the last full backup is going to be bigger and bigger and more drastic. As for an incremental backup, that will only go and check what has changed since the last backup. So incremental is actually the one I would recommend. So you first do a full backup, and then from there maybe a differential, and then from there an incremental. Or just go do full and just go incremental, incremental, and skip the differential one. That's actually my preference. So full backup, differential in the beginning is not going to take too long, so it's not too shabby. And then from there, you're just going to go do incremental, incremental. I would not recommend doing full and then continuously doing differential because it's going to take longer and longer and longer because every time when it does a differential, it's going to want to go and check what has changed since the last full backup. And as time goes by, that's just going to be more and more and more. As for incremental, it will only go and check what has changed since the last backup, and only that would get backed up. So that's going to be a heck of a lot quicker and more smoother, obviously. Question 10. You have been tasked to implement secure physical access to a data center. Which of the following can you use to obviously achieve that goal? So we've got 4 possible things you may or may not want to go and make use of. The first is a badge reader. That doesn't sound too shabby because a badge is something the user or the technician or the person or individual would have to have physically on their person. And without that, they will not be able to gain access to the data center. So far, that doesn't sound too bad. Geofence. Now, what is that? Sometimes we call this geofencing. So that is when you go and digitally specify digital boundaries. So your users or their devices has to be in a specific location, for example, before they can access certain resources, or you can go and track their behavior in a certain location. But it's kind of irrelevant here. I mean, it is a very good security method to go and implement, but not for a data center per se. So to prevent physical access, geofence is not going to work. That is virtual boundaries you get to go and specify. So it's somewhat unrelated. C says motion sensors. So yes, motion sensors are a form of physical security, I would say, but it's not going to prevent people from physically accessing that data center. It will only allow you to know when someone is in there because it might trigger some sort of alert, but it's not going to actually stop them from getting in to begin with. We want to stop them. And to stop them, a badge reader seems to be the way. Then we've got an alarm, which is basically the same thing as a sensor. It's something that's going to alert you that someone or something is in the server room, but it's not going to stop them. It's just going to make a heck of a racket, and that's it. It's not going to stop them from getting in. So sensor, alarm, and badge reader all are physical things, but the only one that's actually going to physically stop them from getting in their tracks is the badge reader. So the answer here, guys, is badge reader. Question 11. You have a user who complains that their machine is running slow. And that's nothing new. Users are always complaining that their machines are running slow. Which of the following could you use to find the problem? Not necessarily solve the problem, just to find the problem. Is it A, device manager? A device manager is something we go and open normally to go and check what hardware has been installed on the device and if a driver has been installed and if it's the correct driver that's been installed. It does not show you whether a machine is running slow or fast or anything in that manner. If you look at B, disk management, that's also a built-in tool like Device Manager, but this one is used to manage your hard drives and other forms of storage. You can go and format them and partition them, that kinds of stuff. C, check disk. So that's also a somewhat hard drive related tool. That is to go and check a hard drive for any damaged clusters or sectors or corrupt clusters or sectors. It's then going to go proceed to try and recover the data. And if that's not possible, it's going to try and move the data to a working cluster or sector. But once again, completely unrelated to the performance of a machine. The last answer, which is the answer, resource monitor. So you can go use resource monitor as well as something else called performance monitor. These are free built-in tools on both the client operating systems as well as the server operating systems that allow you to monitor a computer's performance. You can go check things like RAM usage, CPU power usage, hard drive usage, and of course network usage. The famous 4 main counters. Question 12. You have a user who has a phone that has become very slow and laggy. After you investigate it, you find multiple malicious applications on the phone, so you did a reset on the phone to remove them. All right. You then installed an MDM software, so that is short for mobile device management software. Which of the following should you do to prevent this from happening again in the future? All right, guys, so let's backtrack to that MDM first. MDM is not something specific, but you get one famous one that most companies like to go and use. So one of the main ones we use in companies is something called Microsoft Intune. It's a piece of software which was originally designed to allow you as a technician to manage people's phones and tablets remotely, in a nutshell. It's not the only thing we use it for, though. We use it to manage people's tablets, phones, laptops, desktops. I can manage any phone or device anywhere. It sounds like hacking. I mean, I can see what you have, what you've got on that device, what you're doing, what you've got installed, what you've uninstalled, what you've configured. And I can also go and see stuff and install stuff and do stuff on your device using the software. So it really does sound like hacking. So the catch here is these devices that I manage normally need to be enrolled into the company's Intune environment. You can think of that as giving me permission to manage your device via Intune. So using an MDM, I can do all kinds of cool things. All right, so choose all that apply. So let's read the question again. It says, when you installed an MDM software, which of the following would allow you to prevent this from happening again? So we want to prevent this person or these groups of people from installing malicious applications on their phone. What can we do to prevent that now that we've got an MDM like Intune? Is it A, disable biometric authentication? No, that is just to prove they are who they claim to be, but it's not going to stop them from installing applications. I mean, once they've proven that they are the owner of the device, it's not going to stop them from installing those applications. Is it B, prevent a device root? Yes, that might be possible. So on a lot of devices like tablets and phones, you can go and do something like rooting that device. Rooting is something that's specific to Android devices, but still. So when a user goes and roots a device, they basically go and unlock the hidden developer options and a whole bunch of other cool options and features and functions as well. And that allows them to go and do things on a phone or a tablet which they're not supposed to be able to go and do. So we would like to go and prevent that. And using an MDM, you can prevent that. So you can prevent them from installing applications, for instance. So B is so far one of the answers in my opinion, because the question does say choose all that apply. So there's probably going to be more than one answer. So B is definitely one of my answers. C says require a PIN on unlock screen. No, that's the same as A. You're just forcing the person to authenticate that they are who they claim to be. But once they provided the PIN, you're not going to stop them from installing an application. So it's not C. D says prevent GPS spoofing. So we want to prevent the users from pretending to be in a location that they are essentially not. That's not going to stop it. So yeah, great. Let's say we have stopped them from pretending to be somewhere they're not. It's not going to stop them from installing the applications. E says enable developer mode. Enabling developer mode is the same as turning on rooting. So if you look at answer B, it says prevent root. We want to prevent them from doing that. We don't want to go ahead and turn it on for them. They might as well say go and allow the user or go turn on rooting for the person. We don't want to do that because that's actually going to give them more power, not less. We want to block them. We don't want to allow them. And the last answer there says block a third-party application installation. Yes, that is an answer. We want to block them from installing any form of third-party application. So the two answers here, guys, is B and F. One of your users receives a call from a person pretending to be from their bank. What is this an example of? So we've got four possible choices like usual. So what do we call it when someone or something pretends to be someone or something they are not? That, guys, is called spoofing. So when you pretend to be someone from an organization that you are not, that's called spoofing. When you go and forge someone's IP address, or you go and forge someone's MAC address, or you go and forge someone's email address, whichever one you go and forge and pretend to be, in all of these instances, it's called spoofing. You'll find most often spoofing is combined with other forms of attack, but in this instance, if I call you and I pretend to be from your bank even though I'm not, it's spoofing. And while I do that, I'm probably going to go and combine that with something called phishing, where I'm fishing for something sensitive, something of value. That's what phishing is. So when I do phishing, I'm going to pretend to be from somewhere, usually, which is spoofing, and I'm going to try and trick you into giving me something sensitive, like your credit card number, your name, your last name, your social security number, which in some countries we call ID number, basically something of value. So if I just go and randomly call you or randomly email you and ask you for that stuff, the average person will not give you that. Even if they are not clued up in IT, it's going to seem suspicious. It's going to seem fishy. But if I pretend to actually be from the bank when I call you or when I email you or something in that regard, the average person might actually be inclined to give that information because they don't know any better. So that's what phishing is. Phishing is fishing for something sensitive. A DOS, a DOS, that's an attack. It stands for denial of service. So that's when I or someone or something deny you access to some sort of service. This can be an actual service on your computer, like the print spooler, or it can be in service of some sort. Maybe it's denying you access to an internal website, a public website, denying you access to an internal server or a public server. This can be done by overloading that server, that website, with so much traffic to the point where it cannot respond to your request, or by just, well, plain blocking you of something. So that can also be a form of denial of service attack. Then the last one there is social engineering. That's tricking people into doing things they're not supposed to. So there is some similarities in social engineering and spoofing. So if I, for instance, come to your building, let's say we're in a parking lot. This could be a basement parking lot. I don't actually work for your company. And now I see you opening the door in the basement. This is an access control door where you maybe need to go and put in a PIN number, possibly provide a fingerprint or provide a smart card or a badge before you can get open or get that door open. Now I park in the basement. I don't have a way of getting into that door because I don't work for your company. But what I can do is when you or someone open that door, I can say, hey, can you hold that door for me, please? And the average person's human nature would obviously hold that door open, especially if you see my hands are full. So I can actually carry a box. This could even be an empty box. And what you will instinctively do normally, if you see my hands are full, I ask you very politely and friendly to please hold the door open for me, you're going to do that. Not knowing that I don't actually work for this company. I just tricked you into doing something. So I just tricked you into holding that door open for me and I just got into the building. That's just one of many forms of social engineering where I trick you into doing something you're not supposed to. Anyway, guys, the answer here is A, spoofing. So when I call you to pretend to be from your bank, that's called spoofing. Question 14. One of your technicians is configuring a brand new Wi-Fi router for a client for the first time. What should your technician change first? Once again, there we go. There's a certain word in caps there. So we need to pay attention to that. So that means there's probably more than one thing here that may or may not be correct. What should your technician or you do first when you install a brand spanking new Wi-Fi router? Should you go and change the SSID? And for those of you that don't know what that is, that's just the name of the Wi-Fi frequency. So if you want to go and connect to your home wireless network, that would just be the name that you've given it, or the name that your technician has given your home wireless network. The same with your company. At your company, it'll probably be the name of your company or something close to that. It's just the name. Changing the name doesn't do anything. There's no security associated to that. Could it be B? Changing the default password. Yes. One of the first things we do on Wi-Fi routers, and quite frankly a lot of things out there, we do this on firewalls, access points, you name it. One of the first things we do is to change the password, because most technicians out there like me and you know what the default password is. The default password for most devices is either blank, there is none, or it's the word admin. So if you leave it on the default one, someone like me can come along, log in there, and configure something that's not so nice. So you want to keep me out, and that can be done by changing the default password. Is it C? Encrypting? No. Is it D? Default IP address? Now, yes, that is one of the things we should go and change on a router, but it's not the first thing you need to go and change on a router. The reason why we change the default IP address is because on most new devices, like a router, the default IP tends to be something like 192.168.0.1 or .1.1. Now, at first, this is not going to be an issue. But if you leave it like that and you buy another new device, which is not necessarily a router, it will generally also have that same IP. And then you're going to have an IP conflict. So whenever you install a new device, first thing you do is you change the password. And as soon as possible, when you've got time, you change that default IP to anything else, so that if and when you eventually introduce another new device one day, you're not going to have an IP address conflict. And on that other new device one day, you'll just go and change the IP address again as well. Question 15. The network of one of your clients was breached. After investigating the logs and the reports, you see that it was a dictionary attack. And after 300 attempts, a single user's account was breached with this dictionary attack. Which of the following should you use? Alright guys, so when it comes to breaking into people's accounts and stuff, there's many ways you can go and do that. In this case, they were cracking someone's password. You can use a dictionary attack, a rainbow table, or a brute force attack. Those are the most common ones. A dictionary attack is when the attack uses actual words in the actual dictionary to try and guess someone's password. That's actually extinct. They don't really work anymore because almost everything, all platforms, all websites, everything these days prevents users from using actual words. I mean, heck, right now, you can go to Facebook and you go and create a new account, and you'll see it does not allow you to use an actual word as your password. You have to have uppercase, lowercase, numbers, symbols, and a minimum of 8 characters. That's to prevent things like dictionary attacks and rainbow tables. A rainbow table is when the hacker has got a predefined list. This can even be a notepad file for all we know. This can include 5 passwords, 50 passwords, 500 passwords. It's a predefined list of passwords which they know is most likely to get a hack. It's gonna crack that password. So this is when someone knows something or someone very well to the point where they can kind of make a calculated guess as to what the password would be. Hence the name rainbow table. The last one, which is a brute force attack, is the only one you need to worry about. That is when someone or something just purely guesses the password. There's a human that's next to impossible, but as a computer, it's not. A computer would then go and guess and guess and guess and guess the password, and eventually, sooner or later, it's going to crack that password. Which is why it's so important to have at least an 8-character password, uppercase, lowercase, numbers, and symbols, because the more of that you use, the longer it's going to take to crack that password, and by the time it cracks that password, it would have expired 2 or 3 times over, which is why we do that. So looking at the possible answers in front of us, what can we do to prevent something like a dictionary attack? And believe it or not, this answer is actually going to apply to rainbow tables and brute force attacks as well. Is it a screen lock? No. A screen lock is like a pin or a pattern or a password you have to go and type. But, I mean, if I'm going to go and guess, I can just keep guessing and guessing and guessing and guessing, and eventually I will get in. Is it an antivirus? No. An antivirus is going to stop malware. It's not going to stop an actual attack. Is it C? Account lockout? Yes, that's the answer. We'll get to that in just a moment. Is it D? Longer passwords? No, I mean, that would slow it down. Yes, it's going to slow it down, but it's not going to stop it. So why is the answer an account lockout? That is something we normally go and configure on most devices. You'll find tablets and phones actually have this configured by default. So if you get the pattern wrong on a screen 3 times in a row, or you get the pin wrong or something, whatever security you've got on that tablet or phone, if you get it wrong 3 times in a row, it locks the device or it times it out for a certain period. And you can only try again after, let's say, 5 minutes or 10 minutes. If you get it wrong again, it times out again for another 5 or 10 minutes, or possibly even longer. At some point in time, might even lock the device. Now, on laptops and desktops, this is not something that's turned on by default. I don't know why. Your guess is as good as mine. I always recommend to my clients they should go and turn this on. It's a group policy. It's completely for free. And yes, most companies don't actually go and use it. So if you go and configure that, if anyone is were to go and try and crack your password with a password cracking machine, that machine is going to be dead in the water, because after 3 attempts, it's going to lock that account. It's not going to work. So you can have the world's fastest supercomputer to go and crack that password, but if you've got an account lockout configured on that account, it's not going to work. After only 3 passwords, it's going to time out. It's going to time out again. It's going to time out again. It's not going to work. So that is the most effective thing you can go and use against password attacks, or one of the most effective things. And I can confirm that because I always used to recommend that to my clients. Question 16. One of your clients is a company that would like to dispose of some old computer hard drives. They are concerned, though, about personally identifiable information. That's what PII stands for, personally identifiable information. So that's information that's sensitive. It belongs to people. It's their names, last names, credit card information, social security or ID numbers. So they're concerned about that kinds of stuff on the hard drives. So they don't want it. So they don't want to just willy-nilly throw the hard drives in the trash because of, sensitive stuff that may or may not be on there. Which of the following would be the best to do? So there might be more than one answer. You can see caps there. The word best is in caps once again. Formatting the hard drives. Does that solve the problem? Yeah, kinda, sorta. Formatting the hard drive wipes it, but it does not mean it's unrecoverable. Any data, if a hard drive has been formatted, can be recovered using recovery software. So depending on what the other answers is, it might be A, it might not be A. I would not recommend A though in real life. Is it B, deguzzing? That's very plausible. So far, B is already better than A. Deguzzing is when they send a magnetic pulse for that hard drive, corrupting all the data on that hard drive. So someone's going to try and recover the data. It's ideally supposed to all be encrypted. The A plus course says that's 100% effective. In real life, guys, I can tell you it's only about 99% effective. There's always going to be 1 or 2 files that did not get corrupted, and that's a risk. In real life, we are going to go and use something like a wiping program, or if you're going to go dispose of the hard drives, we're going to go and drill holes for the hard drive, incinerate the hard drive, or shred the hard drive. But deguzzing is not something I'm a fan of. It's not 100% effective. But that might be the answer here, depending on what else we've got. C says manually deleting everything on a hard drive. That's worse than formatting, in my opinion. D says partitioning the drive. That's just going to go and subdivide the drive. It's not going to erase anything. That's probably the worst answer. So the worst answer here is D. Second worst answer is C. A is the third worst answer. It's not bad, but it's the third worst answer here. And then B is the best answer here. To go and send a magnetic pulse for the hard drive. That's deguzzing. To go and corrupt all the hard drive data. So if someone gets their slimy hands on this drive, the data would essentially be corrupted. They can't do anything with it. They cannot even recover the data. That's the idea behind deguzzing. Question 17. One of your users is trying to open some files on their PC, but a message displays stating that the files are encrypted. Which of the following has infected the PC? Now, I've accidentally given you guys the answer to this in the previous question. It wasn't the previous question, but it was one of the previous questions. So when all the files or data on a machine gets encrypted and a message displays on the screen demanding something like a ransom, see where I'm going with this? What do we call that? Ransomware. So ransomware is a piece of malware. It's probably one of the most dangerous kinds of malware you can get out there. It infects the user's machine, their server, or all the machines in their environment. It encrypts them. Normally you can't even browse the PC, but in some cases you can browse the PC. The files will all just be white, and all the names of these files would sometimes be changed to an account number, which is the Bitcoin account that you have to pay into. So that is ransomware. A keylogger is a piece of spyware, not ransomware. It's a form of spyware that spies on a user. It records all their keystrokes and sends it to the perpetrator. So if you are the person that installed this keylogger on the person's machine, you can see exactly what they type. It depends on what kind of keylogger you installed. You get 2 kinds. You get the kind that records all the keystrokes. It sounds dangerous, but it's not. Trust me, it's very tedious to go through everything someone has typed in the hopes of getting something sensitive. And when you get the kind of keylogger that records only when the user is about to type something sensitive, like a username and a password, that's the dangerous one. Trojan horse, that is something that's also malware, but it's something pretending to be something useful when it's actually silently killing your piece in the background. It's pretending to be a useful toolbar. It's pretending to be a useful program or a useful game. And you'll find in most cases, whatever it's pretending to be, that something will actually work in most cases, because otherwise, if it doesn't, you're going to go and uninstall that game or program or toolbar. And then obviously you may or may not potentially uninstall the Trojan horse, and they don't want that. They want you to keep it on the machine. And to do that, they need to make sure this pretend game or pretend toolbar or whatever it's pretending to be needs to actually work. A virus, which is the last one there, that is code that's generally intended to do harm. So it doesn't matter how you sugarcoat it, it's going to do some harm to your PC in some sort of way. That's a virus. So getting back to the question here, it says one of the users is trying to open some files on the PC, but the message displays that it's encrypted. That is ransomware. There's most likely going to be some sort of demand for some sort of ransom in the form of cryptocurrency there in that message as well. Question 18. You need to change the processor in a desktop PC of one of your clients. Before you open the PC, which of the following procedures should you perform first? Now, the word first should have actually been in caps there. I actually forgot to put it in caps, but you can imagine the word first is in capitals there. Choose all that apply. All right, so that means there's more than one answer here. There could be all of them could be correct, maybe 3 of them are correct, maybe none of them are correct. So we don't know. It just says choose all that apply. All right, so what should the user do first if they open a box and they're about to go and fiddle with the stuff inside of that box? Is it A, unplug the computer from its power source? I would say yes, because one of the first things you'd always do is unplug a computer or a printer or a server or a whatever. If you're going to be working on any components, you always unplug it from the power. Your number one concern should always be your own safety. That's number one is your safety. Safety always first. So to unplug the power tells me that this person is concerned of safety, or that you are concerned of safety. So that should definitely be an answer here. So I would say A is yes, that's correct. That's one of our answers. B says remove dust from the ventilation fans. No. You can go and do that as an extra if you want to, but that's not something you should be concerned about when you go and install stuff. C says putting on an electrostatic discharge strap. Yes. So power is first. That should be your first concern. Your second concern should be electrostatic discharge. So if you're going to be touching the motherboard and the RAM and any other form of circuitry, there's always a chance you could go and blow the components. Because remember, the human body has got enough static electricity to blow components. So to avoid that, we use rubber mats, but the most effective way would probably be to use an anti-static wrist strap. You can actually go and strap them around your ankle or your wrists or wherever, and it's got a little alligator clip that you clip onto the inside of the frame. So that way you don't have to worry about discharging into the motherboard accidentally and blowing it. You can just go and willy-nilly touch it. So you can even go and lick it. Maybe not lick it, that might be exaggerating. Answer D says putting the power supply unit in an anti-static bag. No, why would you want to go and do that? So anti-static bags is something we use for circuit boards and stuff, but in this instance you're just opening the box. Why would you want to go and take the power supply out and open it and put it in an anti-static bag? The power supply is not something you would normally put in an anti-static bag to begin with, and in this instance it's completely irrelevant. Completely irrelevant. E says ensuring proper ventilation. That's the same as B. It's somewhat unrelated. So the real answers here, guys, is A and C. Question 19. You need to assist a remote user with an issue on their PC. Which of the following will allow you to see the issue along with the user? So what we want to do here is we want to basically remote connect to the person's PC, and while we see their machine and control their PC, we want the user to be able to do the same. So they need to be able to control the PC and see what's going on it. And at the same time, we need to be able to connect to it remotely and see everything at the same time. Only difference is we'll be doing it remotely and the user will be sitting in front of the machine, but we'll both have control at the same time and we'll both see everything that's going on at the same time. So it's very important you understand that if we look at the available answers here. So the first answer here is VPN, which is short for Virtual Private Network. Now, yes, it is a form of remote connectivity. I will agree with that much. But it will not allow you to control any machine remotely. It's a secure remote connection, which basically digitally teleports you to remote connection or digitally teleports you to remote destination somewhere, but that's about it. It's a secure, encrypted remote connection. So if you are sitting at home or in a coffee shop and you would like to access certain resources that you would normally only be able to access when you were at the office, in your office building, VPN would be a solution around that. So you're not going to see a different desktop, anything different on your machine. It's simply going to be as if you are at the office. So when you VPN or you turn on the VPN, you can imagine teleporting yourself into the office, digitally speaking. Anything you would normally be able to access in your office environment, resources, other machines, servers, and so on and so forth, that would now be accessible. And as soon as you disconnect from the VPN, you would no longer be able to access all that information. It'll be as if you're back at your home or back at the coffee shop. But it does not allow you to go and remotely control any machine. That's not what it does. Answer B, remote desktop. Now that does actually allow you to remotely control a machine, but it's not secure, although that's not what the question is about. So we're not going to worry about the fact that it's not secure. Remote desktop does come with Windows by default, assuming you've got the right edition. Generally, you'll find it's only available on Professional Enterprise Edition. Now, when you remote desktop into another client machine or a server machine, it kicks that person off if there happens to be someone logged on. If nobody's logged on, nobody gets kicked off. You can, however, control that machine fully if you're on the same network. If you're not on the same network, you would have to VPN into that network first. But assuming you're on the same network, you don't even have to be on the same domain, mind you, you will be able to control that machine remotely. The drawback about remote desktop is if you need to assist a user remotely, as soon as you remote desktop to the machine, yes, you can see what's going on and you can control it, but the user cannot see what you're doing. And if you remember, the question says you need to be able to do this with the user. You and the user needs to be able to see the machine and control the machine at the same time. Remote desktop only allows the person that's remote desktoping to be able to see and control the machine. So it's half an answer. It's not the full answer. So your answer is not B, it's not A. SSH. So that's also remote connectivity like remote desktop. However, remote desktop is a GUI interface. You can actually see graphically what's going on. You can browse and use the mouse and click on stuff and all that. SSH is basically the upgrade of Telnet. For those of you that's familiar with Telnet, it allows you or the user to use a command line interface. We normally use something called PuTTY. So you're not going to see any graphical interface. For the most part, you're not going to be able to use your mouse. You're going to need to use commands, and you're going to go and telnet or SSH into another device somewhere else in the world. This will be something like a router or a switch or a firewall, and you will be able to control that device remotely from anywhere in the world, assuming you know the password and username, and assuming you know the commands for that interface, of course. So it's not C, guys. D is the answer because, well, first of all, it's the only one that's left here, but it really is the answer. VNC. Now, VNC does allow you to go remote connect to a person's machine in a graphical interface, very similar to remote desktop. However, it does not kick off that person from their machine. So as soon as you use this program called VNC, it's not something that comes with your machine by default, guys. You're going to have to go and download this and install it on the machine that you're about to connect to, as well as on the machine that you're connecting from. So both machines needs to have this installed. Once you've installed this on both machines, you can then, from the machine that you're connecting from, connect to the one that you're connecting to, and both you and the user can see what's going on the machine at the same time, and you can both control the machine at the same time. The machine that you are connecting to, that user will have to open a program, if it's not open already. They will need to read you an ID number. It's normally called an ID number or machine number. It's roughly about 9 numbers long in most cases. It's a unique number, unique to that machine. It will not change. And then they need to read you the temporary password. So when you connect to that machine, they need to give you their temporary password. And once you're done with the job, you disconnect. And the next time you want to reconnect to that person's machine, they need to give you the new temporary password. So having their ID doesn't do squat. You need their new temporary password. That's to prevent us, or anyone else for that matter, from reconnecting to that machine when the user is not present and then, causing some sort of shenanigans. Now, the only one that's actually covered in the A+ course is VNC. It's the only one mentioned in the slides, in the manual, and that's asked in the exam is VNC. But guys, in real life, we don't just use VNC. So there's about 3 main ones we use, and there's many other ones as well. So the main ones we use is VNC. There's another program called AnyDesk, and there's another program called TeamViewer. And there's many, many other ones that I'm not even mentioning yet. They all essentially work the same way. They all involve you downloading the program, installing it on both these machines, and on the machine you're connecting to, you normally need to go and find the unique number that you need to go and connect to, and then you normally need the temporary password. So they basically do the same thing. The interfaces just look slightly different, but all 3 of these programs are what we are using in real life. But the only one covered in the course, in the exam, and the slides is VNC. So it's the only one I'm going to mention in these questions is VNC, since that's the only one they will ask you about in the exam is VNC. Question 20. You have a user who is unable to open Outlook. So that's the program we use for our emails. They mentioned that it was working fine the previous day, and it also looks like their PC restarted during the night. Sounds suspicious much. What is the most likely cause for this person to be unable to open their Outlook? So what do you guys think that could be? Now, looking at the available answers, A says a malware infection. Yeah, well, I wouldn't say it's a malware infection, but we also can't rule it out. So let's first have a look at the other possible answers before we say it's not A or that it is A. B is system updates. Well, so far that sounds more plausible. The reason why I say that is because the user said their PC restarted during the night. Now, a lot of machines tend to do updates automatically, depending on whether these machines are on domain or something or not. Nowhere in the question do they say that this is a big company, small company, whether this machine is on a domain or not. They don't say anything like that. So it is very likely that this machine went and updated itself, and once updates take place, some of these updates, guys, tends to restart a person's machine. So if you're not on that machine at that given moment to click on cancel or say, hey, I would like to restart later, that machine is very well going to go and restart at that given moment. And machines love doing this when they see you're inactive, like 2 o'clock in the morning or so, because they don't want to have you lose any work. So this machine 10 to 1 went and updated somewhere like 2 o'clock in the morning or so, and then it went and restarted itself. And it's very often that you will find updates sometimes cause some sort of shenanigans on the machine. Something will no longer work. This can literally be anything. It can be something as simple as the mouse stopped working, or the keyboard stopped working, or something on the computer, some program, in this case Outlook, stopped working. So far my answer is B. C says time drift. No, this has got absolutely nothing to do with time drift. Time drift is when your computer or the user's computer or the server starts falling behind with the system clock. So you'll find every day it's ever so slightly more behind and more behind and more behind. And this is most commonly caused by the CMOS battery on the motherboard that's flat. So, obviously as time goes by, it gets more and more flat. You go and correct the time, and tomorrow it's just wrong again, but now it's even further behind. So that's time drift. Time drift is a serious thing, but it would not cause the issues we're having here. And time drifts are more severe in a server room environment, not so much on normal client computers. Then we've got spam filter. Spam filter is just a filter. It's normally a software-based filter that's supposed to go and block unwanted email. This has got nothing to do with unblocking email. So the answer here, guys, is system updates. Question 21. One of your technicians on your team just installed Windows 10 on a computer which has got 32 gigabits of RAM. The technician, however, notices that the Windows operating system only has 4 gigabits of RAM available for use. What could be the most likely reason? So this technician just installed a brand new copy of Windows 10, and the machine that they installed it on has a whole 32 gigs of RAM. That's a lot of RAM, guys. But now when this technician goes and checks on Windows, how much RAM is available, it's supposed to say 32 gigs, but yet it does not. It says only 4 gigs is available of that RAM, or only 4 gigs is usable of that RAM. You're going to find this happens on some machines. Sometimes if you go to your system properties and you right click and you've got more than 4 gigs of RAM, it'll say, let's say you've got 32 gigs of RAM. It'll say, okay, you've got 32 gigs, but in brackets behind that, it might say you've got 4 gigs of RAM. Normally what I've seen in real life, it actually says you've got 3.3 gigs of RAM available. Sometimes the manuals or the slides will say it's 2 gigs, 3 gigs, 4 gigs. It's not actually 3 gigs or 4 gigs. The actual answer is actually 3.3 gigs. But that's besides the point. That's not what the question is. The question wants to know from us, or from you guys at least, what could be the reason for that? Now, I know what the reason is, but I'm still going to go through all these answers. So A here says the RAM has compatibility issues. No. If the RAM had compatibility issues, it would not register at all, and you're probably going to hear some sort of BIOS beeping code. It's not a compatibility issue. Some of the RAM is defective. Nope. It's definitely not that one. C says the new operating system is x86. That means it's 32-bit. And D says the new operating system is x64, which means it's 64-bit. The answer here, guys, is x86, which means it's 32-bit. So what happens is when you install any 32-bit operating system, it doesn't have to be Windows 10. This can be Windows 11, 10, 8, 7, whichever. Any Windows operating system that you install, which is a 32-bit operating system, is limited to 3.3 gigs of RAM. So you can go and install 32 gigs of RAM, 64 gigs of RAM. You can go and install RAM until you're blue in the face. But at the end of the day, you're only going to be able to access or use 3.3 gigs of that RAM. Now, the exam will never say 3.3 gigs because, let's face it, this is A+. It's not that technical. So the answer in the exam will either be 3 gigs or 4 gigs. They will not give you both of them because that's too flippin' close. So they'll give you something like 1 gig, maybe 4 gigs, 8 gigs, or 16 gigs. So only one of them is going to be close to 3.3 gigs. I would say choose the closest one to 3.3 gigs. It's normally going to be like 4 gigs in the exam or so. In real life, I'm telling you now, it's not 4 gigs. It's actually 3.3 gigs. So it's a limitation of 32-bit. But if you or the user were to go and install a 64-bit operating system, you would actually, in fact, be able to use all of that RAM. So yeah, if you've got a 32-bit operating system, it doesn't even help you go to install more than 4 gigs of RAM because you're not going to be able to use it. You're just throwing RAM down the drain, figuratively speaking. Question 22. You must troubleshoot a desktop computer with a suspected short in its power supply. Which of the following should you do first? Yeah, there we go again. That word is in capital letters, which means there is a possibility there's more than one answer here, which is actually correct. We want to know which one is more correct. What should you do first? So there's more than one thing here. It's probably something you're going to have to go and do. But out of the things that's listed, what should you do first? All right, so the first answer here says disconnect the computer from the power or the wall socket. So far, I think that is the answer. Why? Because safety always comes first. And then you worry about making sure the user's data is safe and that it's backed up and not compromised or going to get compromised and that kinds of stuff. But your number one concern always is safety. Your safety and a customer or the client or the user safety. Number one is always safety. If you put safety first, you'll always be able to identify the answers in the exam. Now, B says, put on an electrostatic discharge strap. Yes, I do agree. That is something you need to go and do when you go and change the power supply because you're going to be working with the internal components of a computer. But, there's a but. It's not the first thing you're going to do. The first thing you do is you disconnect the power because your safety comes first. And then we'll worry about not blowing the motherboard or not blowing the RAM chips because that's what we use those straps for. Those electrostatic discharge straps is to prevent your human body from discharging the static electricity in it into the motherboard or the RAM chips or any form of circuit boards. So we don't want to do that. That is very important. We don't want to do that. But your safety comes first. So far the answer is still A. C says turn off the power supply switch at the back of it. No. I mean, that is turning off the power, so that's technically more correct than B. So it's still turning off the power. But in my opinion, I would say disconnect it from the wall. So you'll find that most power supplies, this is something I would have discussed in module 1 of my A+ course, if you guys followed my course. Most power supplies have got a switch at the back. And if you turn that switch off, the power inside the box is dead. And generally that gets the job done. Generally that would work. But you never know. One day is one day, and that switch might not work, or the power supply might be faulty, and you're going to go turn it off from the power supply, and it might actually not be off because it's faulty. You're putting your life in danger. So it will be safer to do A instead of D, A instead of C. A is to completely plug out the power, so it's impossible there's going to be power there.
D says plug out the main power cable on the motherboard. No. Plugging the main power cable out on the motherboard simply removes power from the motherboard, but the whole computer is still live. All the power cables are still live. All the circuitry, excluding the motherboard, is still live. So which one is the safest option here? If you put safety first, that would be A, guys. Question 23. Which of the following would be an example of MFA? MFA, for those of you that don't know, is short for multi-factor authentication. So let's start at the beginning. What is authentication? That is when you or someone or something proves they are who they claim to be. So a common example would be if you go and give a username and a password or an email address and a password. Only the owner of that device or that account would know what that details is. And if you know the details, that's obviously enough proof that you are the owner to that account or that device you're trying to log into. Now, what is multi-factor authentication then? That is when you or some user has to prove in more than one form or way that you are who you claim to be. So there's three main categories we normally speak of. It's not the only three, guys. So if you want to go and comment down below and say, but that's not the only three, I'm well aware it's not the only three. So the three main ones or most common ones is something you know, which would be something like a password or a pin or a phrase. The second main category is something that you have physically on your person. This would be something like a bank card, smart card, thumb, cell phone. The cell phone, because the cell phone normally receives an OTP, a one-time PIN. And where do you receive that? On something that only you or the person has physically on their person. You'll find quite often most phones these days have some sort of authenticator app for Microsoft or the banks or whatever. So if you want to go and do some sort of transaction on your banking app, you have to go and acknowledge it on the phone as well. Or if you want to do it on a computer, you have to also once again acknowledge it on the phone as well. The third category is something you are, which is normally biometric in nature. So that'll be things like fingerprint, retinal eye scan, voice recognition, facial recognition. So there you guys go. There is three categories, three of the main ones, but it's not the only ones. I mean, just to give you an idea, it could also be somewhere you are or something you're doing, just to name a few. So yeah, now you guys get the idea. Now looking at the available answers here, which of the following is an example of MFA? So this person, whoever they are, has to prove they are who they claim to be, but in more than one category at the same time. It has to be in two or more categories at the same time, two different ones. If it's two but it's in the same category, no, it doesn't count. So if you look at answer A smart card, what is that? That's something you have physically on your person. And then a pin, that is something you know. So A is actually correct, that's the answer. B says password and pin. Password is something you know, but a pin is also something you know. So that's two things, but it's two things in the same category. So that's not multi-factor, it's just two things, two authentications, but it's not multi-factor authentication. C says a username and a password. That's both things you know. Username is something you know. A password is something you know. Also not multi-factor. And then the last one is fingerprint scan and facial recognition scan. So fingerprint is something that you are as a human being, which is biometric. And facial recognition is also something that you are, which is biometric. Once again, in the same category. So B, everything in B is in the same category. Everything in C and D is in the same category. The only thing that's got two different categories here is A, which is something you have and something you know. So the answer here, guys, is A. Question 24. Which one of the following is the most basic and cheapest version of Windows that includes BitLocker? So we're not asking you here, or they're not asking you what is the cheapest version of Windows. They are asking you which one of the versions of Windows is the cheapest that actually includes BitLocker. So you're going to have to go and maybe start from the bottom of Windows and go up the ladder until you find an edition that actually comes out of BitLocker. Or you can go down the ladder until you find a version of Windows that no longer comes with BitLocker. So Home and Home Security Edition does not include BitLocker. Those are cheap versions, but they don't include it. So it's going to be between Enterprise and Professional. Both of them include BitLocker, but out of those two, which one is the cheapest one? Enterprise is the most expensive one you have, or that you will get. That's got the most functions and features and goodies and toys and stuff. Pro is one click lower than that. It's one click cheaper than that, but it still happens to have BitLocker. So the answer here is Pro, guys. Question 25. You must set up a laptop for a client of yours that travels a lot. Which of the following would be the best security practice? So this client is obviously concerned about security. They travel a lot. So it's probably going to be a matter of what happens if this laptop gets stolen or misplaced. Most likely stolen. So the client is most likely concerned about the data on the laptop, not the laptop itself. You can always buy another laptop. It's 10 to 1 under insurance if this person is traveling a lot. So it's probably being used for business purposes. So it's most likely insured. So most people, especially companies, you'll find, are not concerned about the laptop itself. They are concerned about the potential data it may or may not have. It might be sensitive in nature. And if it happens to land in the wrong hands, that can be bad. So how do we prevent that potential data on that machine from getting into the wrong hands should someone get a hold of this laptop? Is it a physical laptop lock and a chain cable? No, that's going to prevent the laptop hopefully from getting stolen to begin with, but it's not going to secure the data on the laptop. Is it B, a password that expires every month? No, I mean, that is security. I'm not going to disagree with that. Both of the top two is security. But a password that expires can still be cracked. It is not the best security for someone that's traveling a lot. It can be very easily cracked. I mean, I can go and crack that password probably in 30 seconds. It's not the best security. C is a pin-based login. That's the same as a password. It's still something you know. The one is not really more secure than the other. It's not really going to help much. D says hard drive encryption. Yes, that is the answer here, guys, because if someone gets their hands on that laptop, the data on it is rendered useless. So they need to be able to decrypt the hard drive, and the only way to do that is if you're the owner. You need to have a special flash drive or a smart card or a password or all of the above before you can actually go and decrypt that hard drive. If you can't, then you might as well just throw that laptop away, or at the very least throw the hard drive inside the laptop away because, well, the hard drive is rendered useless. You cannot even go and format that hard drive if it's been encrypted. It's completely dead in the water. And that's what you want. I mean, it might not give you your laptop back, but at least you know your data is safe. They will not be able to get a hold of your data. Question 26. You have a user that is unable to visit the website lately, which they used to be able to visit. So they used to be able to visit the website, but now lately it doesn't work anymore. You already checked and confirmed that the website is indeed online. So we know it's not the website itself that's the issue here. Which of the following steps will most likely solve the problem? So there might be more than one thing here or more than one solution here. The fact that the word most is in capital letters there. Is it A, deleting the browser history on the user's computer? No, that's not going to solve the problem. So you or the machine, more specifically you, will just not know what the address of the website is. You're going to have to go and look it up again. But typing it in again, that's not going to make any difference. Is it clearing the cache? That could potentially solve the problem. All computers have what we call a DNS cache. And what happens is, if your computer goes to a website for the first time, or if it hasn't been to any website in a very long period of time, it's going to contact what is known as the DNS. It's going to say, hey, DNS, where is this website, or what is this website? So if you're trying to go to Facebook for the first time, or you haven't been there in, let's say, 6 months, your computer is not going to know where the cheese that is. It's going to contact the DNS and say, hey, listen, my bro, where is this place called Facebook? The DNS will then tell your PC, okay, my bro, Facebook is at the following IP address, and it will give your computer an IP address. There is a possibility that at that point in time, when your PC stopped working the first time, it could be that the DNS was faulty. Maybe someone poisoned the DNS, or maybe that website's IP address has changed. Now, why that is an issue is only the first time your PC goes to a website, or if it hasn't been there on a very long time, will it contact the DNS. But if you go to Facebook again or that website again in a very short period of time, let's say it's literally just the next day, your PC will in fact not contact the DNS again to ask where it is because it's going to remember how it got there. It works almost exactly the same as your human short-term memory. If you need to come to my house, let's say for a beer or a coffee, the first time you want to come to my house, you're probably going to have to use a GPS because you've got no idea how to get there. But from day 2 and day 3 and day 4, if I invite you for a coffee or a beer again, you're going to know how to get there because of your short-term memory. But if enough time goes by, let's say 6 months or so, you're going to forget how you got to my house because it's been too long. And you're going to have to resort to using your GPS again. Computers work in the same way. So if they have been to a website very recently, they would remember what that IP address was because of something called the DNS cache. It's not going to ask the DNS how to get there because it remembers. But what if that website's IP address changed? So your PC is going to think it remembers, but meanwhile it remembers the wrong IP address now. It's kind of like you've been to my house yesterday, but in the meantime, last night I moved to a new house. I moved to a new house last night. I didn't inform you, and now I invite you for a coffee or a beer again. And you're like, sure, cool, I'll be there at lunchtime. You come to my house, but I've moved. Oopsie daisy. And that's what's happening here. So I should inform you of what my new address is what I need to do. So you basically have to force this PC of this user now to ask the DNS all over again what the new address for this website is. And to do that, you basically need to give that computer amnesia. You need to clear the DNS cache. And this can be done by going into command prompt. You don't even need to know this part for this question, although this is something still useful for A+. You go into command prompt. In command prompt, you're going to type the command ipconfig /flush DNS. Remember that command, guys, because that's not just a question in the exam. It's also a PBQ in the exam. There used to be a PBQ in the exam where you're going to be required to go and erase the cache or wipe the cache. And you're going to be doing that in command prompt. The command for that is ipconfig. It's one word. ipconfig /flush DNS. That would give the PC amnesia. And it doesn't mean that it's not going to be able to load any website. Everything is still going to work perfectly fine. All websites are still going to load perfectly fine. They will load at the same speed and everything. Nothing's going to be different. The only thing you're doing is in the background, you're forcing that PC to ask your DNS all over again where these sites are. So in case you guys haven't noticed, the answer actually here is B. C is restarting the user's computer. I mean, yeah, restarting a computer does a lot of things, but it's not going to fix this particular problem. D, enabling ad blocking. No, why would I want to go and block ads? I mean, it's not loading the site to begin with, so to go and block ads is just going to make matters worse probably. So it's not going to go and allow that in any sense. So the answer here, guys, once again, is clearing the cache, the DNS cache to be more precise. Question 27. You have been tasked with upgrading the operating system of one of your clients from Windows 7 to Windows 10. So you've got a client that wants to upgrade from Windows 7 to Windows 10. The user currently has Windows 7 Professional installed, which is a 32-bit operating system, and they would like to have Windows 10 Pro installed, so it's also professional, but that's a 64-bit. So they want to go from Windows 7 Professional to Windows 10 Professional, but they want to switch from 32-bit to 64-bit on their computer. Which of the following would be the correct path for this user to go and follow? So we've got 4 paths we can potentially follow here. Does the user need to go and do A, an in-place upgrade, which will take them from Windows 7 Professional, which is x64, to Windows 10 Pro x86? So they're basically going to test you on 2 things in the exam in a question like this. This is my custom question, but you can expect similar questions in the exam. So they want to see if you understand that if you want to switch architectures like 32-bit to 64-bit, you need to do a clean installation. If you stay on the same architecture, it's your choice. You can either do a clean installation or you can do an in-place upgrade. In-place upgrade can be done if you've got an existing operating system and you don't want to go and have to reinstall all the programs and restore all the settings and the data and all that. In-place upgrade allows you to keep everything on the machine. It's simply going to go and upgrade the operating system itself. But to be able to do that, you need to stay in the same architecture and preferably the same edition. So if I want to go from 7 to 10, it needs to be 32-bit to 32-bit or 64-bit to 64-bit. You cannot do an in-place upgrade if you're going to be switching architectures. So I can't go from 32-bit to 64-bit or vice versa if I'm going to be doing an in-place upgrade. It's not possible. In-place upgrades is only possible if you stay on the same architecture. As soon as you switch architectures, you need to do what we call a clean installation. So you're going to have to go and back up all the data, wipe everything, and then install everything from scratch, and then restore all the data and the programs. It's excruciatingly a lot of work, but it's the only way around that. So once again, what does this user want to do? We know they want to go from 7 to 10, and we also know they want to switch from 32-bit to 64-bit. So right off the bat, I can tell you that's not going to be an in-place upgrade. In-place upgrade is only possible if you stay on the same architecture. This person is not staying on the same architecture. They're switching from 32-bit to 64-bit. So it's going to be between C and D, a clean installation. So that's one thing we're testing you on. Another thing that this question is testing you on is to see if you understand how you write out 32-bit. So besides writing 32-bit like I wrote in pink there at the top in the question, you can also write it as x86. And 64-bit, besides it being written like 64-bit and pink like I wrote there in the question, it can also be written down as x64. So it's testing you on two things. You'll notice in the possible answers, I did not write bit. I just wrote the other way that you would write it out to test you on two things here. So if I want to have Windows 10 Professional 64-bit, it's going to be a clean installation. And how do we write out 64-bit? x64, not x86. That's 32-bit. So the answer here, guys, is D. A clean installation of Windows 10 Professional, which is 64-bit. Question 28. One of your users has been on leave for 3 weeks and is now unable to connect to the office network. Their Windows allows them to log in, but they can't access internal or external websites, nor can they access any resources on the network. Which of the following is most likely the problem? So there's more than one possible answer here. We want to know which one is the most likely one here. Is it A, the user's password has expired while they were on leave? I mean, it's possible, but I mean, they said the person can log in. They can log in. So if their password expired, they would not be able to log in. It's not the password that expired, otherwise they would not be able to log in. B says the user clicked on a link in a malicious email. No, they would not be able to log in then, because normally if there's some sort of malware, there would be other symptoms and they would probably be locked out. So it's not A, it's not B. C says the user enabled airplane mode. Now that is possible. Airplane mode is normally something you'd find on phones and tablets in most cases, but it can also be found on laptops. So it will allow you to log in, but any form of wireless communication on that device, whatever it might be, is now disabled. So Bluetooth is off, NFC is off, radio frequencies is off, Wi-Fi is off, everything is off. So this explains why a person can log in, because they can normally log into a PC because it's cached. Assuming the user logs in of the last username they logged in, they would still be able to log in because the PC cached that credentials. If they try and log in of a new account, it most likely will not work because they're going to try and contact the central point of authentication, which is normally your Active Directory, and it's going to be unable to do that. But in this instance, since the person is trying to log in and they can log in, it tells me they are logging in of the same account they would normally use. So it does belong to them, that device. But the fact that it can't access any resources, that tells me it is airplane mode. The answer here is airplane mode. So as soon as they turn that off, they would be able to communicate over the network again, because all wireless communication will be turned on again. The answer D here says the user connected to a captive portal while traveling. Now, if you don't know what that is, if you go to a coffee shop or a restaurant or places like that, you'll find often they'll say you've got free Wi-Fi, free internet. But normally there's a catch to it. So for you to be able to use that free Wi-Fi, they might say you have to buy something first, like a cup of coffee. And only after buying something, your waiter or waitress would give you a special code. And if you go to their Wi-Fi and you try and connect to it, it's going to ask you for a special code first. And on that little portal website where you put in that little special code to give you access to the internet, that, guys, is called the captive portal. So you might have gone to a coffee shop as an example, or the user might have gone to a coffee shop. They connected to that coffee shop's internet after typing in that special code, and they never disconnected. Now that's not going to have this influence. Normally, from what I've seen, and you guys can probably relate, as soon as they leave that coffee shop and they come back to their home Wi-Fi or office Wi-Fi, you'll find most laptops, tablets, and phones will auto reconnect to any wireless frequency that it recognizes. So D would not cause that. B and A would also not cause that. The only thing it can cause this problem is C, airplane mode. Question 29. You discover that at one of your clients, a very high amount of connection requests are coming from all over geographically. What type of attack is this? Is it A, a distributed denial of service attack, which is also known as a DDoS attack? So it's just two capital D's, one small O, capital S. DDoS attack, denial of service attack. At the moment, I think that's what it is. Is it B, a phishing attack, where someone is trying to fish for something sensitive in nature? So that's when they send you an email or they call you and they pretend to be someone, normally in the hopes of you giving up something sensitive, like username and a password or a credit card number. Is it the answer C, 0 day? 0-day is when someone just discovered a weakness, literally like maybe a moment ago or today, and they plan on making use of that vulnerability. They plan on selling it to the highest bidder, or they want to go and exploit it today before the security companies have some sort of security patch that's going to remedy that. So the answer is not B, it's not C. So far I still think it's A. Is it D? Ransomware. Ransomware is a piece of malware that would normally encrypt everything on a user's machine, their laptop, desktop, servers, whatever. Everything would be encrypted and a ransom would be demanded. So nowhere do we mention anything about encryption or ransom being denied or being demanded here. So the answer here is A, distributed denial of service. You also get a normal denial of service. So that's normally when a large bunch of computers has been infected with a piece of malware, and only when they get infected by that malware, we call those PCs zombie PCs, or we call them part of a bot network. Botnet or just bot network. That's what we call them. So these PCs have been infected by that piece of malware. And this could be hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of machines. And we can go and give these machines that's all now been infected with that malware an instruction to go and do something, to go and crack a password. So if you've got 100 PCs cracking the same password, they're going to crack it a heck of a lot faster than one PC would be able to do. And that's actually one way we crack passwords, by the way. Or you can tell them all to go and spam. Or you can go and tell them all to go and do a mass phishing attack. Or you can go tell them all to go and do a mass denial of service attack. So what that means is if you have a website or a server or something, it can only handle a certain amount of traffic, maybe 100 people or devices at a given time. And you go and take that bot network of yours now, or that zombie network of yours, and you tell all 100 or all 1,000 of those machines, or however many they might be, to visit the exact same server or website at the exact same time. You are going to overload that website or that server, which causes it to either crash or time out, thus causing a denial of service. So now when any other real person tries to access this website or server for real, the server is going to be unavailable because the server is now overloaded or it's timing out for that matter. That is a denial of service attack, guys. In case you're curious, those zombie PCs, you'll find very often the users of those PCs would not know. So if your PC gets infected by this malware, you most likely will not know you've got this malware unless you've got a proper antivirus. So you can be carrying on with your normal day-to-day tasks, playing games, doing your work and all that. Meanwhile, in the background, your PC is silently carrying out instructions that's being received from somewhere else, and you're none the wiser. So your PC is still usable by you, the user, but it is in fact a zombie PC, or part of a bot network as we call it. Question 30. You are busy installing new network equipment at one of your clients who has a SOHO network. So that's short for small office, home office network. It's a small business. What is one of the first things you should do when you install a new piece of network equipment? Is it A, lock all devices in a cabinet? Is it B, ensure all the devices are from the same manufacturer? Is it C, change the default admin password? Or D, install the latest operating system and patches? Now, all of these are good things to go and do, mind you. But the very first thing we normally go and do is we change the default admin password. So on something like a router, access point, firewall, all of these network equipments, the first thing we as administrators do is we change the default admin password. The default username is normally admin on most of these devices, and the default password is normally admin as well, or it's blank. And since most of us know that, I mean, even you guys know that now because I told you, we can take advantage of that. So it's a good idea to go and change it. Otherwise, people like us are going to come along and take advantage of that. And then before you know it, you've got a problem. So your number one concern here is security. So change the default password, guys. Question 51. You are busy assisting a customer or a client with a problem. You notice that it's taking longer than you expected and that you're going to be late for your next customer or client. What should you do? Now, guys, this is a sticky situation that we're all going to find ourselves in sooner or later. There's going to be times when you're going to be busy with a customer or client, and you've got another appointment and you can see that you're going to be late. Some customers or clients just sometimes take longer than what you expected. Other times the customer or client wants to keep talking and talking and talking, and we can't always just go and cut them off because that's rude. It's not polite to do that with a customer or client. So what should you do in that sticky situation when you see you're going to be late for your next customer or client? Is it A, send a quick message regarding the delay to that next customer or client? I don't know, that sounds pretty plausible. It sounds pretty professional to me. Is it B,
cut the current customer or client's time short and rush to the next client. Eh, Maybe, but that doesn't sound very professional. The current customer is not going to like that very much. That doesn't sound professional towards the current customer. You might potentially lose that customer. They might not like it very much. So I don't think it's B. Is it C? Apologize to the next customer when arriving late. No. I mean, you can apologize. It's still good to apologize if you are late, but it would be nice if you inform them ahead of time that you're going to be late, so they don't sit there wondering what the cheese is going on. I mean, if imagine someone is late for an appointment that you were supposed to have with them, and they are the ones that's late. Wouldn't it be nice if you received a little message, just a quick message, hey, sorry, I'm going to be late, 5 minutes late, 10 minutes late. Then at least you know, okay, let me go to the restroom, let me go get a snack, get a cup of coffee, go stand outside, have a smoke. At least you know what's going on. Instead of sitting there or standing there for like 5, 10, or half an hour, it's just not nice. Is a D. Arrive late to the next meeting without even acknowledging the time. Now that is just plain rude. I would get very annoyed by that. So the answer here, guys, is A. That is the most professional thing to do, is to send a quick message to the next customer or client, assuming you've got their details, of course, telling them, hey, sorry, sir, ma'am, I'm going to be late. I think I'm going to be late for about 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. Give them a time frame as well. The question doesn't state that, but I can tell you guys now, never mind just telling them you're going to be late, give them a more or less time frame. It's very nice for the customer or the client to know more or less how long you might be late. Question 52. One of your users connected the laptop to a wireless network and was tricked into providing login credentials for a website. Which of the following was used to carry out this kind of attack? Is it a Trojan? So a Trojan is more commonly known as a Trojan horse, and this is normally when it's a program or an app or a game or something pretending to be something that it's not. It's pretending to be something useful, like a program, game, or app or toolbar or something. Meanwhile, it's silently killing your machine in the background. So this one is to steal credentials. That's what the question says. A Trojan horse doesn't do that. Trojan horse pretends to be something it's not. It's not that. Is it B, a DDoS attack? So just a couple of questions ago, you remember we had that as a possible answer, which was a distributed denial of service attack. So that's when you've got a lot of computers that's infected with some sort of malware, and then those machines are given an instruction to go and cause mass spam attacks, mass phishing attacks, mass denial of service attacks, where you go and overload a service. So that's none of the above. So it's not A, it's not B. Is it C, a 0-day attack? That is when someone or something just discovered a new weakness in some sort of software or platform or hardware, and they plan on exploiting it that same day normally before it gets patched or before there's some sort of remedy or security update for it. So that's not it. The answer here is D, because, well, that's the only one that's left once again. An evil twin is not something you guys will come across very often. It's something I hardly ever see. I've been in IT for more than 2 decades, and I can't really say that I've seen these often. They are super rare. It is when someone goes and basically makes a duplicate router or access point, and they trick users into logging into that router or access point instead of the real one. And when you log in there, and you log into a website or something, you are going to provide your credentials, and I, the owner of that fake web or that fake router now or whatever, I'm going to get your details because you're going through my equipment instead of the correct equipment. You're logging in through the wrong router or access point. There's many ways you can go about doing that. I mean, I can just go and make a router that's close to yours, give it the same SSID, so that's the same wireless name. And I mean, I can, for instance, just make the password blank, because most machines would auto reconnect to their Wi-Fi network if they disconnect and they come close again. And your machine is now going to connect to my Wi-Fi, or you're going to go connect to my Wi-Fi because it doesn't ask you a password. And since it doesn't ask a password, you're not going to think anything weird of it. And then before you know it, you give me your credentials. So it's D, evil twin. Question 53. One of your users enabled a screen lock on their mobile device, so it could be a tablet or phone, where they must draw a pattern. Yeah, that sounds like a phone most likely. The user is worried that someone might be able to guess that pattern. What can you now do to address this concern of this user? Is it anti-malware? No, anti-malware's got nothing to do with preventing people from logging in. It will secure the phone in a sense of malware, so if someone
or something installs malware on that device, yes, it may or may not help with that. But keeping people off, no, anti-malware will not do that. Is it B, turning off data on the device when it's not in use? No, that's got nothing to do with people logging in. So whether you've got data or not, whether it's turned off or not, that will not keep people off. A screen lock is a screen lock. So it might be a pin, it might be a pattern, it might be a fingerprint. Either way, whether the internet's on or off, whether there's data on that phone or not, or that tablet or not, it will make no difference whether you can log on to it or not. Is it C, failed login attempts? So far, I'm inclined to think that's the answer. Or is it D, remote wipe? The remote wipe is not the answer here, guys. It's actually C. Remote wipe is if you have misplaced that device, or if someone owns a device and they no longer work for your company. You can go and do what we call a remote wipe. It wipes the information on that device, and yeah. So someone worked for your company and they no longer work for your company, and the device they used belongs to them. It's a BYOD scenario, bring your own device scenario. If it belongs to them, and you or your company feel that they may or may not have sensitive information on that device, you can go and remotely wipe it. Failed login attempts is something you'll find most commonly on phones and tablets. It's actually turned on by default on most phones and tablets. So as soon as you get the pin wrong 3 times, or the fingerprint wrong 3 times, or the pattern wrong 3 times, the phone or the device will either lock or it will time out for an X amount of time. And after a minute or 5 minutes or however long it's specified, it will allow you to try again. And if you get it wrong again, it'll time out again for the same period or possibly even a longer period of time. So that's really good at keeping people out, because most people, when they try and break into something, this includes myself, we will use some sort of password cracker. And if I use a password cracker, it's only a matter of time before I get in. It might take a day, it might take half a day, it could take a week, but I will get in eventually. If you're going to enable failed login attempts, that stops me dead in my tracks. I can only try 3 passwords, and that's going to lock me out for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or however long, or it might just lock me out, period. And that just leaves my program, my password cracker, dead in the water. It means nothing. And funny enough, this is actually turned off on most computers. Most companies do not have this turned on. And I always tell my clients, please, for heaven's sake, turn this on. It's something you can go and turn on via group policies in the company environment on the servers. You can force that down onto all the users. So if the users logs in, they would not notice any difference here unless they obviously get their own passwords wrong 3 times in a row, which is very unlikely. But if someone is going to try and break into one of your users' accounts, oh yes, that's going to stop them completely. Very effective, and yet it's completely for free. So why not use it when it's for free, for crying out loud? Question 54. You have a user whose PC is unable to resolve external web pages. So there's a DNS server here involved. You notice that specific IP addresses are working though. What would you most likely need to solve the issue? Is it the default gateway? No, the default gateway is the first device you or the user's device has to go through to get to the outside world. Now, the first device you or any device normally has to hit before they get to the outside world might be the router. If it's a home environment or a small office environment, it's the router. It's the first and the only device you've got to hit to get to the outside world. So the default gateway would then be the router. But if you look at the medium or a large size company, the first device a computer normally has to hit, or a cell phone or tablet or whatever, is normally the firewall. And from there, you would go to the router. But the point here is it's not the default gateway. Is it the name server? Yes, that is. A name server is your domain name server or domain name service. So that's a DNS. It's a server or a role you install on a server that basically, in a nutshell, converts IPs to names and names to IPs. So if you go to your browser and you type in an address like youtube.com, your computer doesn't actually know what that is or where that is. At least it doesn't the first time you go there, like I said in the earlier question in this video. So your machine, this could be your tablet or phone even, is going to contact the DNS and say, listen, my bro, my user just typed in youtube.com. I've got no cooking clue what that is or where that is. Can you help me out? And the DNS is going to be like, sure, bro, let me help you out. The IP address for YouTube is the following. And it's going to give your computer or your device the IP address for YouTube, and your machine will be able to get to YouTube. So if we look at the question again, it says your user has a PC that's unable to resolve external web pages. You notice that a specific IP address is working though. So if you go and type in the IP addresses for those websites manually, which is something you can go and do, the web pages load. But if you try and load them by typing in the actual names of the websites, they don't work. That tells us it's the domain, the DNS. But DNS is unable to go and resolve those IP addresses or those names. It's a DNS issue. So the answer is B, but just in case you're curious what C and D is, C is also a role and D is also a role. So basically B, C, and D are all three roles you would install on a server, each doing its own unique thing. An Active Directory is a role you install, which is called ADDS, Active Directory Domain Services, and it's effectively the role you would install on a server that allows you as the administrator to create all the user accounts and groups you would use in your organization. And you can also go and configure your group policies there in your organizational units, if you know what that is. DHCP is also a role you would install on a server, but that is to go and allow you to create scopes, which allows you to specify how many IP addresses are available and from where to where you're going to be dishing out IP addresses. So if anyone connects to your network, that device normally does not have an IP address. And as soon as they connect to your network, the DHCP is the server or the function that gives that device an IP address. And as soon as that device gets an IP address, they or it can now access resources like the internet. Moving on to question 35. You have been tasked to implement security at a server room. Oh, goody. Which of the following is the best security for a server room? Choose two answers. So we're not going to just choose one, two answers. So you can see it's a pretty decent list, 6 possible answers, and we need to choose two. So when it comes to security for a server room, what would be best? Is it A, a badge reader? That doesn't sound too shabby. That actually sounds pretty decent. So far A is an answer for me. Is it B, bollard? Now that's completely irrelevant to a server room, wouldn't you say? Is it C, a biometric lock? Well, that also sounds pretty decent. So far my answer is A and C. Is it D, a cable lock? No, that's more something you would use for a laptop or a desktop, more specifically for laptops to tie them down to a table so someone cannot steal a laptop from a table. Is it E, a USB token? No, unrelated. Is it privacy screens? In F? No. You get many kinds of privacy screens, but privacy screens, if you don't know, is to keep people from seeing something they're not supposed to. This can be something silly, like a screen over an ATM screen. So if you go to an ATM to withdraw money or deposit money or do whatever, you'll find that some ATMs, if you stand at an angle behind someone, you cannot actually see on the screen. The screen just looks black. It appears black. That's because it's got a privacy screen over the screen, preventing people from being able to see on the screen unless they're directly in front of that screen. But you get other privacy screens which just prevent people from seeing what you're doing. So if you're sitting at your desk, you'll find sometimes you get these separators, like wooden separators or whatever separators, that prevent your colleagues from seeing what work you are doing. They cannot see on your screen. They cannot see what papers you're working on. They're close enough and you can hear them talking. You can even hear them breathing in some cases, for crying out loud. But they cannot see your work or what you're working on. That's another form of privacy screen. So it comes in so many shapes and sizes. But privacy screens, guys, are unrelated to this question. So the two answers that you need to choose here is badge reader and biometric lock. That does not necessarily mean, however, that's what we will use in real life. Those are pretty good things to go and use in real life, and very often we do use those in real life, but it doesn't mean we're limited to that. Very often in real life, you'll find at a server room, we'll use like a keypad where it asks you for a PIN, or it might ask you for a password, or it might ask you for a smart card, and. So there's quite a few things, but it normally is something that you as a human would have to go and provide physically by the door. Question 56. Which of the following attacks uses information which is personalized in an attack in order to gain information? So when we say personalized, we mean that this attack is focusing on a specific someone in the company. You're not just randomly trying to attack the company or randomly gunning for a certain account. No. You are targeting a specific person in this company, and you've probably gained information about that person, personal information about that person, and now you're going to go for that person or their account. What do we call that? Is it phishing? It's plausible. The question does state at the end to gain information, but phishing is just to gain random information from random people. So A is plausible, but it's not the full answer. Is it B, spear phishing? Yes. Spear phishing is also gaining information from people, but that is when you or someone or something are targeting a certain individual by customizing your attack. So the answer here actually is B, guys. Is it C, a denial of service attack? No, that's denying a service like we said in a couple of questions ago. Is it D, spoofing? Spoofing is when you forge something, forging an IP address, a MAC address, an email address, a phone number, and so on and so forth. So we're not pretending to be someone we're not, but we are trying to steal information from someone or gather information from someone, and we're doing that because we have information about that person, certain specific information about that person. Question 57. A fellow technician needs to install a 32-bit operating system on a computer. Which of the following amounts of RAM is a 32-bit operating system limited to? Does this sound familiar? So if you guys have been watching this video and you paid attention to the previous questions we went through, you would know the answer here. So I told you guys, a 32-bit operating system is limited to how much RAM? So the actual real answer is not listed here. So if you paid attention, you would know that the actual answer is not actually listed here. The actual answer is 3.3 gigs of RAM. And I told you guys in the previous part of this video, in the exam, to just choose the answer that's as close as possible to 3.3 gigs of RAM. So you'd either say 3 gigs in the exam or 4 gigs in the exam. Normally it's going to be 4 gigs. So the answer here is 4 gigs. Question 58. One of your users would like to enter their username and password only once. Which of the following best describes when a user enters a username and password but only once? So to give you an example of how this would work, guys, if you open a web browser and you log into a company portal, let's say this is a 365 portal, yes, it's going to ask you for username and password. That would be considered once. But if you open another tab and another tab and another tab, which is all company portals, and these portals are all linked to one another, wouldn't it be annoying if it asks you on every tab to log in? Yes, it would. You'll find in most companies, in most instances, if you open additional tabs, which is more or less on the same portals, it would not ask you again to log in. It will only do that if you close the browser entirely, you close the whole browser session, and you start a new browser session. Yes, then if you open that first tab again, it's going to ask you to log in again for the first time. But from there, as long as you're logged in, it's not going to ask you to log in again if you open extra tabs. It's not going to do that. That concept, guys, is called single sign-on. And that will be C here between the answers. SSO stands for single sign-on. It asks the person to log in, so it still asks them to do that to prove they are who they claim to be, but it'll only do it once. If you look at answer A there, that's MFA, multi-factor authentication, which we discussed earlier in this video. That is when the user needs to prove they are who they claim to be, but in more than one form. B is inheritance, so that's more applicable to things like NTFS permissions, for example. So you apply a permission to a folder or something like that, and any sub folders will also inherit that permission. So that's more applicable to things like that. D is authentication, so that's similar to A. Authentication is when you claim or you prove you are who you claim to be. That's it in a story. You are who you claim to be, or this item or this server is what it claims to be. Multi-factor is just proving it in more than one way, though. So the answer here, once again, is C, guys. Question 59. One of your technicians would like to make use of an answer file during an installation. Which of the following installation types would require the use of an answer file? So an answer file is if you're too lazy to go and install, or you would want to go and automate the installation. You'll find in medium to large size companies, technicians don't necessarily sit in front of a laptop or a desktop and go and click next, 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 and choose the language and the time zone and how you would like to partition the hard drive. I mean, you can, but it's not something we normally go and do. The installations is normally either somewhat automated or fully automated. How do we do that? We use answer files. And in what kind of installation do we do that? An unattended installation, guys. So an unattended installation is an installation that's somewhat automated, and that answer file is going to go and answer questions. So like if the installation asks you what time zone do you want, you go and you normally have to go and choose your time zone for your specific country, and the answer file is now going to go and answer that for you. If it wants to know what language you want, the answer file is going to choose that for you. And after the whole installation is done, we would normally land on a desktop. If there's certain customizations you would like to have been done, let's say the font needs to change a little bit, or the desktop background needs to change a little bit, you can even have that included in the answer file where it goes and pre-configures certain things for you. And when the installation is done, the font will be pre-configured, the desktop will be pre-configured, So it's just to speed things along and automate things. A clean installation, if you look at answer A there, guys, that's if you go and wipe everything and you reload everything from scratch and you do it manually yourself. Upgrade is if you have an existing operating system and you want to upgrade to a newer and better one. Just keep in mind you have to stay in the same architecture like we said in the previous question. So if you have 32-bit installed, you have to keep onto 32-bit. If you have a 64-bit operating system, you can only upgrade to 64-bit operating systems. As soon as you want to switch architectures, you need to do a wipe and load and do a clean installation like A. Answer C says repair. So that's also when you've got an existing operating system, but that's if it's faulty, corrupt, broken. So it's not really installation, it's more of a repair than anything else. So the answer here, guys, is D, unattended. Question 40. You have a user that would like to shut down gracefully and prevent file corruption in the event of a power failure. Which of the following should the user use? Is it a surge protector? So a surge protector prevents surges in power, like the name suggests. So if there is a lightning storm outside and a lightning hits the power lines, anything like that, that might potentially cause a surge, as an example. And these surge protectors will prevent that surge from coming through because it's got a fuse in it. And as soon as the voltage goes too high, the fuse would blow and the voltage would never actually reach your equipment like your computer. But it does not keep your PC up and running in the event of a power failure. So in case the power fails and it's completely gone, completely missing, that's not a surge protector. Surge protector, that should prevent a surge. So you need some sort of battery power or a generator to prevent the PC from going down and so that you can go and shut it down properly. Answer B says UPS. UPS is short for uninterruptible power supply. What does that sound like? That sounds like our answer, and it actually is, guys. A UPS also has a surge protector built into it, mind you, which is not the point here, and it's got a battery backup in it. So in the event of the power going missing for whatever reason, if there's a blackout or whatever, that UPS would keep your PC up and running for an X amount of time. How long? Well, that depends on how big the battery is, how much power your computer consumes, how big your screen is, how power hungry your computer is, all that. But on average, it'll be between 2 minutes and about 10 minutes. It's not designed to keep the PC up and running for a long time. It's only designed for you to save your documents, close everything that's open, and just randomly and just peacefully or gracefully shut down your PC. So the answer is B. Is the answer C? No, because I just told you it's B. A power strip just gives you extra sockets to go and plug into. Is it D, a power distribution unit? No, it's not D. So the answer here, guys, is B.
Question 41. You notice an employee or a possible non-employee going through the recycle bin. Which of the following threats is this? Now, guys, when we say recycle bin, I'm not talking about the recycle bin on your computer, like on your desktop. No, not that one. We're talking about the bin that you would, for example, find below someone's desk. So what kind of threat is that if you find some random person going through some other random person's bin? What could that be an example of? Now, guys, that could be phishing. Is it? No, it's not. Phishing is when you're phishing for something sensitive. You're trying to trick someone into giving you something of value. Their username, their password, a credit card number, basically something of value, something sensitive in nature. So you're going on a fishing expedition in the hopes of getting something of value. Spear phishing is very much the same thing as phishing, except spear phishing is when you're targeting someone specifically in a company, and normally you already have a bunch of information about this person, and using that information that you have about that specific person, you're going to go and target this threat specifically at that individual. Now, if you look at answer C, that says dumpster diving. That actually is the answer here. That's when you go through someone's trash, which is not necessarily below their table. It's just usually going to be below someone's table. So when we say dumpster, a lot of people have got this picture in their mind of someone outside the building actually diving into a dumpster, digging through a bunch of banana peels and stuff. I mean, I suppose it could be that, but no, that's not normally what happens. In real life, it's normally when someone in the office, this could be an employee or a non-employee, would go through someone else's trash, that little bin below the desk or next to the desk, in the hopes of getting something of value. So that's why we sometimes have paper shredders at our desks, because we don't want someone to go and do what we call dumpster diving. Now you know why people shred papers. Otherwise, someone else is going to go through that person's trash in the hopes of getting something sensitive.
So if you have got sensitive documents, go and shred your papers, destroy your papers. Don't just throw them in the trash, because someone else can go through your trash, and before you know it, they could maybe get their hands on something sensitive. Could potentially be a username and a password, credit card number, bank account number, basically anything of value. Answer D, which is not the answer here, is impersonation. So that is when I'm pretending to be someone or something I'm not, which is technically another form of spoofing if you think about it. So spoofing slash impersonation is when you're forging something. You're forging your identity, forging your MAC address, forging, I don't know, your phone number. See where we're going with this. So once again, the answer is dumpster diving, guys. Question 42. You have a user who is working from home who is complaining they can't view or access in-office network folders when they're at home. Which of the following is the most likely cause or the most likely reason? So you'll notice, like usual, that word most is in capital letters. So what does it tell us? There's most likely more than one possible answer here that might be correct. We need to check which one is the most likely to be correct. What is the most likely scenario here? So we know the person is at home. We know they can log on to the PC and do their work, but we also know they can't seem to access any files or anything at the office for that reason. So if you have been watching this whole video, and if you've watched my course, you'll know that normally if people work from home, they have to go and remote connect to the office to be able to connect to folders and resources and stuff at the office. What kind of connection do we normally use for that, folks? That is a VPN connection. Because if you are normally at home on your laptop, for instance, and you try and open a folder or a document or something that's, for example, on the server, are you going to be able to open that? No. Why? Because you're not at the office. You're at home on your home network. That server at the office is not on the same network as you right now. So when you try and open that folder or that document, or you try and find them even, you're not going to find it. You're not going to be able to open it. So how do we get around that issue? One of the ways we get around that is to remote connect to the office. And the most popular way to do that is to go and use something called VPN. Now, after I said that, you probably know what the answer is going to be here. VPN stands for Virtual Private Network. We did mention that earlier in this video, somewhere in one of the earlier questions. It allows you to go and remote connect to another location, like the office, in a secure, encrypted connection. It's like digitally teleporting yourself to the office. Even though you're physically at home or wherever, this could even be the coffee shop, it's as if you're at the office, digitally speaking. Anything you could normally view and do and access when you were at the office, well, that's going to work now. But if you were to go and disconnect from that VPN, it's as if you were back at home again. So the answer here, guys, yes, if you guessed VPN, that's correct, is an inactive VPN. The user has not turned on a VPN connection, so it's basically as if they're on their home network, like a normal connection. But as soon as they go and activate that VPN by just clicking on connect, it's going to ask them for username and a password, then it will be as if they are at the office. Now, if we look at the other possible answers here, which we know is not the answer, obviously, MDM policy. So MDM, like we said earlier in this video in another question, MDM is for mobile device management. An example will obviously be Microsoft's Intune, which allows you to manage your users' devices. You can go and control what they do and what they can do, and you can see what they've got on the devices. So MDM policies is where I get to specify, or where you guys get to specify, what these folks can do and can't do on their devices. Yep. Look at answer B, an outdated antivirus. Now, this has got nothing to do with an outdated antivirus. And even if an antivirus is outdated, that does not mean it doesn't work. It's simply outdated, and it will not be able to detect all the most recent and latest threats. But all the old ones, it's going to do a bang-up job at protecting against those ones still. Untrusted software. Nope. So this person could normally go and view all this stuff, but now they can't. So this has got nothing to do with untrusted software. The answer, guys, is D. VPN, or should I say inactive VPN. Question 43. One of your technicians informs you that a distributed denial of service attack is taking place in your company and that most of the traffic is coming from PCs in your own company. With what have these PCs been infected? Choose all that apply. Alright, so as you guys can see, there's a bunch of answers, and as it states, choose all that apply. So that means there's not necessarily just one answer. It could be that none of them are right, maybe some of them, maybe all of them, we don't know. So let's go through them. If all the traffic is coming from within your building, we can honestly say, okay, you know what, it's probably going to be your PCs that's been infected. So your PCs don't have people on them. They are automatically trying to go and bring down something like a server or a website by flooding it, basically. And we have actually touched on this topic multiple times, in fact, in this video already. So if you go back a whole bunch of questions, you would see we have actually touched on this topic. And I have actually given you the answer already in a previous question in this video. So if you go and infect a PC and force it to go and do things like cracking passwords, do phishing and spamming and, causing a denial of service attack, what do we call that, guys? That's called a denial of service attack, and that PC is now part of a what? It's part of a botnet, sometimes called a bot network. And that PC is also referred to as a zombie PC, which is also something I've mentioned earlier in this video. So just because that PC has now been infected of this malware, which basically causes it to carry out instructions, basically it does my bidding, if you want to call it that, that does not mean the user can't use that machine. In most cases, the user would be none the wiser. I mean, the whole idea is they need to be none the wiser, otherwise they're going to go and clean the PC, and then that PC is no longer going to be part of my bot network, which means I'm going to lose out on some resources. We don't want that. So at the end of the day, you'll notice it might only take like 1% of your RAM, 1% of your CPU. I mean, heck, most technicians like me won't even notice that 1% missing. So it infects a large amount of PCs in the background, makes them part of a zombie network. So they're all zombies doing my bidding, if you want to call it that. And one day is one day. This could maybe take months before I give these machines an instruction. So the whole time they could be doing nothing. And then after 2 months, I suddenly giving them an instruction to go and crack a password, or to go and do a denial of service attack somewhere on some website or some server by overloading that website or server. So in this instance, if you read the question again, these machines are causing a lot of traffic on one of your own company thingamabobs. So it's a denial of service attack, but it's originating from within your own company. It's not something I normally see. Quite frankly, I don't think I've ever seen that. I've seen a lot of denial of service attacks, some of them massive in scale, but it always originates from outside the company. I've also had cases where my users' PCs would be part of a bot network, but that bot network would normally not attack the own company or the very same company which it has infected. It's normally going to go and attack something else outside that company. So, but I suppose there's always a first time for everything. If you look at the possible answers, it's none of those other ones. So it's going to be B and F here, if I haven't highlighted for you guys yet. Spyware, like the name suggests, is just to go and spy on people. So that would be something like keyloggers to see what people are typing. If you look at answer C there, a virus. I've said that earlier in this video as well. It's a piece of code where the intention is to go and do harm. Normally this is to go and break someone's machine. If you look at answer D, ransomware, like the name suggests, it's going to hold something ransom. Normally someone's machine, their server, the whole flipper network, everything gets encrypted. There's normally a message displaying on a screen that says you need to go and pay a ransom. This is most commonly done in some sort of cryptocurrency to some sort of cryptocurrency account. And just like a real hostage situation where you've got real hostages, you've got no guarantee the hostages will be released. In this case, the computers or the servers are the hostages. It might get unencrypted, it might not. You never know. If you look at answer E, a worm, those are kind of extinct. I actually wanted to say they're extinct, but then just the other day, a couple of years ago, I saw a worm again. I couldn't believe my eyes. But it's not something I would worry about. I mean, these days, even if you have absolutely no antivirus, no security, the chances of you getting a worm is very unlikely. People don't really worry about worms anymore. So in the old days, you would normally get these via email most commonly. The user or someone clicked on the wrong email, clicked on the wrong attachment or the wrong link, and whammo, you got a worm. Displays a lot of inappropriate ads on the machine, makes it slow, and it sends itself out to everybody in your contacts list, which is just one giant awkward situation. That's actually all it does. It's to embarrass you and make a very big awkward situation. Question 44. A client logs a ticket claiming that some of the local hardware on the computer, like their mouse and their printer, has stopped working. Which of the following will most likely resolve the problem? There we go again, with the most being capitalized so many times. So you're going to see that over and over in the international exam as well. It's not going to be exactly these questions, but it's going to be similar to mine. So in the international exam, if you see a word like the word most, best, least, pay attention to the answers. There's most likely going to be more than one. That's correct. We need to check which one is the more likely one here. So the person's mouse and printer stopped working. What would most likely cause that? or what would most likely resolve the issue in this scenario? So answer A says rollback updates. That's very plausible. It is possible that this machine went and did some sort of update yesterday or during the night, and that's most likely why the printer or the mouse doesn't want to work anymore, because Windows updates are not completely innocent. Very, very well known to cause all kinds of random shenanigans on machines. And if you go roll back the updates and you suddenly see stuff works again, well, then you know it was the updates. So far, A sounds like a good answer. B says check for updates. No, the machine wouldn't just randomly stop working unless it's got malware, so I don't see malware as a possible answer here. C says disable Windows Update service. Now, assuming it's an updated related issue, disabling the update service would not solve this issue unless you first remove the culprit update. So if you first go do A and then C, then yes, you can go disable the update service, even if it's just temporarily until Microsoft gets the ducks in a row. But right off the bat, disabling the update service is not going to solve the problem. The pesky update that caused the issues, that's still going to remain installed. So disabling it's not going to do any good. You first need to remove the pesky update, and then you go and disable Windows Update service. It's most likely going to be only temporary until Microsoft gets the ducks in a row. Answer D there says putting the PC on a metered connection. That's somewhat unrelated. So if you or your client has a machine that, for example, updates or does things like that on what we call a connection that is not uncapped, it's a capped connection, which means you've got a certain amount of data for that month or for that week or for that day. Maybe your limit is 20 gigs for the whole month, and once it's up, it's up. You're going to have to go and buy or purchase more data. So people that's on a metered connection or that's got a limited data plan, they're not very keen on Windows updates because maybe you're going to start your PC, an hour later suddenly all your data is gone and you haven't done anything besides checking your email. That's not very nice. So what we do in those specific situations is we'll put that PC on a metered connection. It will then not download Windows updates unless you tell it to. And if you even open things like your Windows Outlook to go and check your email, receive email, you'll find it shows you your emails that you've downloaded and sent thus far, but it will not send any new emails or receive any new emails unless you tell it to. So it's going to have like a yellow bar in Outlook that says you are on a metered connection, and it's got a gray button that says click on connect. If you click on connect, only then and then only will it go and send and receive the emails. So that's at least going to save you a lot of data. So yeah, I think we pretty much ruled out B, C, and D here. The answer, guys, is A, rolling back updates. So it seems in this scenario it was a pesky update that was causing the shenanigans. Question 45. The company of one of your clients has an open wireless network. Clients and vendors need to be able to connect to the network without having to log in. Your client is concerned that the nearby business is using their wireless network without permission. Now that's not very nice. Which of the following will allow your client to address this issue without asking their clients or vendors to log in? So we're setting up a situation. You've got an open wireless network in your building or your company, wherever it might be. And the reason for that is so that your clients or vendors that comes into your building can just go and connect to it without being prompted for some pesky username and password. It's very annoying when it does that. So people just go and click on connect and voila, they've got internet. The problem with such a connection is any other people nearby, in this case another company or business nearby, that picks up that wireless frequency. So if it's strong enough and they pick it up, they can go and connect to that wireless frequency and use it for their business and basically abuse your good heart, I suppose, your free internet. They're going to go and abuse it. Why are they going to go and pay for internet when they can use your internet? It's not very nice, is it? So what can we do to, well, stop that? So can we go and do A, change the SSID? So for those of you that don't remember, that is the name of the wireless network. So if it, for example, is currently the name of my company and I go and change it to something else, would that stop them? Heck no! They can just go and click on a new one and voila, they're going to connect again. So it's absolutely not going to solve the problem. Can we go and do B, MAC filtering? That would stop them, but that's going to cause another issue. So MAC filtering, MAC addresses is something that's unique to every machine. All laptops, desktops, tablets, phones, and pretty much anything out there that can connect to a network has its own unique MAC address. So you could go onto that access point or router, and you could go and create a MAC filter. And what you could also do is you can go and add the MAC addresses of all the devices that's allowed to connect to it. If anyone else or anything else for that matter tries to connect to that wireless network, they're going to be blocked. So you don't need a password for that. Now, the problem with answer B is you can have random clients and random vendors coming in at random times. We don't have their MAC addresses, and they're most likely not going to be on that filter. So they're going to be blocked. So B is going to block your own clients and vendors. So yes, we're going to block out that other business. We're going to solve that problem. But in turn, we're going to cause another issue, which is to block our own clients and vendors. So we're actually causing another issue. Solving one problem, only to cause another. Is it answer C, power levels? Now that actually is the answer here, guys. So what we mean by that is this is not something that's possible on all routers and access points. You can actually go and configure the signal strength of that router or wireless, how far it broadcasts. So you can go and adjust it until it's in such a way where the signal literally pretty much just reaches the walls of your building. As soon as you go just outside your building, the signal is dead or it's so weak to the point where you can't do anything with it. So it basically needs to just reach the last walls of your building and not seep through that. We call that leakage. We don't want it to leak through the building walls. And yeah, so if anyone's going to stand outside the building now or just nearby, they're not going to be able to pick up that SSID because the signal is going to be too weak. Sometimes we'll on purposely go and increase the power levels in some situations where if someone or something is too far away, we can increase the power levels to the point where it actually goes further and further. But it's more common to see companies decrease the power levels to, well, not leak through the walls or anything. So if we don't want anyone or anything else to go and hack our network or abuse our network, in this case it's to abuse our network, we will go and reduce the power levels. Most commonly this is used to prevent people from hacking into the network. They can't hack something if they can't reach that something. Now the other three remaining answers, D, E, and F, is not the answer. So content filtering, that's more something you will go and do on a firewall or something like that, maybe a proxy, to go and block what people can go and access online and whatnot. We want to block whole companies here or whole devices, not specific websites. A firewall, pretty much the same thing. It can also do content filtering and much more. But once again, the firewall is not going to block that whole other company per se. The last one, changing the Wi-Fi password. That could work. I would say that's the second best answer here. But changing the Wi-Fi password is very much the same as that MAC filtering, in my opinion. I mean, MAC filtering, yes, that's going to block the other company out. It's going to be a hard block on another company, but it's going to block my own clients and vendors. If you go and look at F, yes, that's also going to block that other company out. It's not a hard block because it could potentially go and crack that password, guess the password, hack the password, blah, blah, blah. The issue of F is you're also going to once again block out your own clients and vendors. Remember, they're not supposed to have to log in. And if you're going to have a Wi-Fi password, that's a direct contradiction to what the question actually wants you to go and do. So lastly, the answer is C, power levels. Question 46, folks. A technician needs to upgrade a lot of machines in their company to Windows 11. They notice they only have one disk, and they decide to do it over the network instead because it's going to take flipping forever if they're going to have to go and do a lot of machines using only one disk. Which of the following boot methods initiates such an upgrade? So normally in the old days, if you wanted to go and install Windows onto a machine, you would have to boot from a CD or a DVD. In other words, a disk. You would have to go into the BIOS. Nowadays it's called the UEFI. You would have to go and change the boot order, and you would change that PC's boot order to boot from CD or DVD first, and then from there it's going to install it to the hard drive effectively. So that's CD or DVD. One of the first things it does is it copies like a mini version of Windows to the hard drive first, and that's one of the reasons why you'll see multiple reboots during the installation. It copies a mini version, a mini operating system to the hard drive so that it can basically sustain itself, reboots the computer. Now, once it reboots, it's actually running from the hard drive, and that allows the machine to use the full remaining speed of the CD or the DVD-ROM to copy the remaining files. Otherwise, if I had to run Windows from that CD or DVD and at the same time try and copy and install files from that CD or DVD, it's going to take forever because it can only spin or do a certain amount of revolutions per minute. But what if I go and copy a mini version for the time being to the hard drive, run Windows temporarily from the hard drive while I copy the remaining files from the CD, and I can use the full revolutions per minute just for copying. Now, since we've got that concept in the back of our minds, there's other ways you can go about installing Windows obviously as well, which is what this question is about. You could go and say, hey, I want to boot from SSD, which is basically just a hard drive. That's a specific kind of hard drive, but they might as well have just said hard drive there under answer A. That's by default where one would boot from if everything has been installed. So the answer is definitely not A here. This person wants to boot or install over the network. And booting from the hard drive is not going to do that. That's just the normal booting mode. B, optical drive. No, we don't want to boot from the optical drive because then you're going to be installing most likely from the optical drive, not the network. C, flash drive. You could boot from a flash drive. That's actually the replacement for the optical drive because it's a heck of a lot quicker. You'll find half of machines these days don't even come out of optical drives because nobody uses them. Instead, we just use flash drives. It's cheaper and it's quite frankly a heck of a lot quicker. But that's not how we install over the network. To install over the network, that will be answer D, guys. PXE. It's normally a disk. It's basically a mini operating system. It allows your machine to run the mini operating system from the CD or the DVD-ROM while it copies the remaining files over the network. So just like of a normal old school installation, we would run the mini version from the hard drive while it uses the full speed of the CD-ROM to copy the remaining files. Now, instead of using the full speed of the CD-ROM to copy the remaining files, you're going to use the CD-ROM as the temporary operating system while you use the full speed of the network to copy the remaining files. It's just a more efficient way to copy files and run the operating system temporarily in the background. So you need a temporary location to run your operating system, a mini version that is. In this case, that's the PXE disk. And then while you go and use that temporary location, you can use the other location's full speed to copy the remaining files. So in a nutshell, we just don't want to use the main location for copying and running at the same time. Otherwise, it's going to take forever. I'm not saying it's not going to work. It's just going to take 2 times, 3 times, maybe 4 times longer. So it's just a more efficient way to get things done quicker and smoother. Question 47. One of your technician's friends is installing the latest operating system on a user's computer. The user wants to retain all their settings and all their files to remain intact after the installation. Which type of installation should the technician do then? So this person wants the latest operating system, but at the same time, they want to keep all their settings and files. What kind of installation would that be, guys? Is it A, a network installation? No, a network installation is just a normal installation, except you're doing it over the network, like the previous question stated. So there's going to be a PXE disk involved. It's probably going to be a wipe and load. B, a clean install. That's definitely not it. A clean install is when you boot from wherever, network, CD, flash drive, you wipe everything, so there's going to be no settings or files that's going to be retained, and you go and install a clean, fresh copy of Windows. There's going to be nothing there. No settings, no files, no nada from the previous operating system. That's as clean as it gets. Is the answer C, an in-place upgrade? Yes. An in-place upgrade is if the user or you has an existing operating system on there and you would like to upgrade to a newer and a better operating system. And in doing so, it normally keeps the settings and the files and everything else in place. Obviously, there's a couple of catches to that, like we mentioned earlier in this video. If you would like to go and do an in-place upgrade, you need to stay in your lane. And I mean that in more than one way. You need to stay in your lane in a sense of architecture. So if the user is running a 32-bit operating system, they can only upgrade to another 32-bit. If they're running 64-bit, they can only upgrade to another 64-bit operating system. Also, edition-wise, if they're running professional of whatever operating system, they can generally only upgrade to another professional edition. And the same for enterprise and the same for the other editions. So generally, all I'm going to say is stick in your lane. So the answer is C. D is an image deployment. That's got nothing to do. Well, I wouldn't say nothing to do. That's when you've got a pre-configured version of Windows that's got settings pre-configured. It's got programs pre-installed and all that kinds of stuff. This person would like to upgrade. They wouldn't like all this stuff to be replaced. So if that image is going to be deployed, it's probably got its own settings and files and its own programs. So that's going to overwrite the current settings and files and stuff. So I wouldn't say you're going to have nothing, but it's not going to be the stuff that you want to keep. That's going to be an entirely different operating system with an entirely different set of settings and set of files and all that. So the answer here is C. Question 48. A user at the company of your clients is working with highly regulated data. The user notices that often there is a high amount of traffic in their work area and they're concerned about possible data exposure as people walk by. So basically what's happening is this person's sitting in an office somewhere and there's a lot of people walking around nearby, behind them or next to them. And there's always a chance that one of these people could possibly see something on their screen or sees something on a piece of paper which they're not supposed to see. The data this person is working on is very sensitive, which is why they're saying it's very highly regulated. So there's a very good chance that someone one day will see something on a piece of paper on the screen which they're not supposed to see. So how do we tackle that problem? Which of the following security measures can be used, as the question states? Is it a biometric device? Now, a biometric device is not the answer here. It is security, but has to keep someone out of something or somewhere. We can't keep people out of that office. We just want to prevent them from seeing stuff they're not supposed to see. But for all we know, they work in that same office, or they have to walk by that desk. So we can't keep them out of that office. We just want to keep them from seeing stuff they're not supposed to see. A biometric lock, that's going to keep them out altogether. That's going to be a little too extreme. Is it B, a cable lock? No, that's too extreme. That's to prevent someone from stealing an actual device like a laptop. We don't want to block them from stealing a device, at least not in this scenario. We just want to block them from seeing stuff they're not supposed to. So it's not A, it's not B. Is it C, a privacy screen? Yes. You'd remember privacy screen is also something that was listed in the previous answer. On a previous question, it was listed as a possible answer. It was not the answer in that question. I don't even remember what the question was about. In this instance, the answer actually is privacy screen. I mentioned to you guys, you get this in many shapes and sizes and many places. It could be on an ATM. So if you stand behind someone at an ATM or at an angle, you would see that screen looks like it's black. You have to be in front of the ATM screen before you can actually see on it. It doesn't apply to all ATM screens. I've seen some ATMs that doesn't actually work on, but it's supposed to be like that. It could also be in an environment like in a company, like in this specific situation, where if someone sits nearby or next to you, they can't see on your desk because it's like a small little cubicle.
So you've got this wooden sides or panels or walls or whatever you want to go and call them. These are very common in office environments, normally to keep your co-workers or colleagues from spying on you or checking what you're doing on your desk, your papers. I suppose it's kind of like a form of cubicle, if you want to call it that, except it's like a mini kind of cubicle. If we look at answer D there, which we know it's not the answer is obviously C, a man trap. It's not something that we see often, especially in the IT environment, but they do exist out there. You'll more commonly see these in other environments which is not related to IT. I, for example, see these a lot at banks and jewelry stores. I suppose this does differ from country to country. In some countries, you might see these at banks and jewelry stores, where in others, you might not. In my country, you'll find these at banks and jewelry stores. So if you are outside a bank in my country, you'll find that they've got these man traps before you can go into the bank or outside the bank. Normally, it's like a giant bulletproof glass box. It's got green and red lights on both sides. If you want to go into the bank, you have to open the first door, but before you can do so, you have to wait for the light to turn green. Once the light turns green, that means you can go and enter the box. And once you enter the box, you have to close the door behind you. And then once you're inside the box, you have to wait for another light to turn green. Once that light turns green, you can open the second door and get into the bank. The same procedure needs to be repeated when you want to exit the bank. So it's a bulletproof box where they can go and trap you. So if they see you coming in and you look suspicious, they can actually trap you in that box. Or if you have tried to rob the bank, or if you have successfully done so, they can trap you once again in that box. So this same concept applies at jewelry stores, and apparently you also get these in IT, maybe in front of server rooms and stuff like that. I've never seen them in IT, but you never know. They might exist. I myself have never seen them, but I do know they're out there. So if you guys have ever seen a man trap in your IT environment, by all means, please let me know in the comment section down below which country you're from and where in IT you saw a man trap. I would very much like to know that. It sounds fascinating. Speaking of comments down below, guys, if you've got any questions about any of these questions, wow, that sounds funny when I say it like that. Any questions about something that was discussed in this video, by all means, ask those questions in the comment section down below. Alternatively, you can join the Discord server group, which I'll mention at the end of this video again, that you'll find in the video description as well. So check out the Discord server. You can ask your questions there as well. If you guys haven't done it already, please give this video a like. I do put a lot of effort into it. I mean, check how far we are. We're over 2 hours at this point in time. So, yeah, the least you can do is give it a like. All right, moving on. One of your corporate clients recently got infected by a malicious application on a flash drive. Which of the following best practices could have prevented it?
Is it A, removing the guest account? Now, you'll find that pretty much all operating systems these days, from the days of XP onwards, have a guest account. These guest accounts, up until Windows XP, was turned on by default, and the average person like us would normally go and turn them off, or at the very least go and put a password on it because it had no password. From Windows Vista, which is the end of 2008, beginning of 2009, the guest account has still been there until this day. It's still there, but it's disabled by default. So there's no need to go and remove this account. It's disabled by default. Only an administrator can go and enable it, and then you can go and choose what you want to go and use it for. So A is absolutely not the answer here. Is it B, disabling auto run? Yes, it actually is. So what happens is, if you put a memory stick slash flash drive slash USB stick, or whatever you want to go and call that thing, if you put that into a USB port on a computer, if there happens to be any form of malware on that stick, you'll find that most of these malwares are triggered as soon as you put that into the USB port. And why most of them are triggered is because of something called auto run. I don't know if you guys have ever seen it. You most likely have. If you put a stick into a USB port, depending on what that stick has on it, if it's got some music files, video files, PDF documents, it's going to pop up with a small little window on your computer screen that gives you suggestions of programs that can open the files that's on that stick. So if you've got MP3 files, which is songs, it'll give you a couple of suggestions of various media players on that machine of yours, assuming you've got more than one. If you only have one, it'll only give you the one. If you've got video files on that stick, it's going to give you suggestions of media players that can open those specific video files. The same goes for any other file type. Now that concept, that little window that pops up, is auto run. Now for auto run to know what is on that stick, it has to go and check what is on that stick, which means it triggers any malware that may or may not be on there. Not all malware gets triggered like that, but most often that's how it gets triggered. I would say about 9 out of 10 times it's triggered because of auto run. And if you're going to go and open the stick yourself, that just makes matters so much worse. So what almost all IT guys like me do, and you guys are obviously going to go and do this too now since you know about it, is to go and disable auto run. So it doesn't disable the PC from opening memory sticks or anything like that. It's just from this point forward, that little window that pops up, it's not going to pop up anymore. So now it gives you time, or designation time, to go to computer, right click on that stick and scan it with some sort of antivirus first before you go ahead and open it. Obviously we know the answer is not C and D because I just told you it's B. Encrypting the data is not going to make any difference, and using strong passwords neither. Question 50. That's the last one in this video. Wow, we made it. The company of one of your clients does not allow USB drives to be available in workstations. Now, before I read that question further, that is something that's actually very common in many companies, especially if they're concerned about data leaking. So if you are concerned, or a client's company or your company is concerned about people potentially copying something onto USB sticks or external drives, this is something they'll normally go and do. They will block USB drives or external drives from popping up. So if you go and plug something else in that's USB, like a mouse or a keyboard, anything else that's USB, they'll work just fine, like normal. But as soon as you plug in a USB storage device, nothing's going to work. You can do this in various ways. One way would be to go do it in the registry. Another way would probably be to go and do it via group policy, and so on and so forth. Now let's read the question further. It says, an exception, however, needs to be made for one user. So we've got a specific person where we need to go make an exception. Maybe they need to go and copy things to and from the machine, or this could be a technician, a fellow co-worker that's in IT. You change the policy for one user, so that leads me to believe this is a group policy. So you're going to go and change the group policy, but specifically for this one user. Which of the following commands should you run next? Is it A, CHKDSK? So that's check disk. That's how you go type check disk. That's a command prompt command, guys. Well, actually, all of these are command prompt commands. That command prompt allows you to go, or that command prompt command allows you to go and check the hard drive for damaged clusters and sectors and to go and repair the hard drive. It's got nothing to do with permissions regarding USB. It's to go and scan the hard drive if it's been damaged or corrupted or something like that. If we look at answer B, GP update. Yes, that's the answer. GP update is for group policy update. I wouldn't say you have to run that command, So what happens is as soon as you go and roll out some sort of new group policy, whether it affects one person or many people or one device or many devices, it does not actually kick in immediately. It only kicks in on those devices the next time that PC starts up. So if that PC is on the whole day, nothing's going to happen until such time that machine gets turned off and it gets turned back on again. Then the first time it starts back up again, after you've applied that policy, it's going to go and apply these new policies. Now, what if that policy needs to be applied immediately? Besides telling the user to go and restart the machine, what would be another way to go and do it? You can go and run the GP update command. Now, where you run that command is on the user's machine, not on the server side, guys. On that user's machine where you suspect this update is going to take place or where it needs to take place, you're going to open command prompt, you're going to run GP update, you're forcing it to go and update its group policies. That's basically a shortcut way of doing it without having to go and restart the PC. So if you don't want to, if you're too lazy or whatever reason, yeah, you can go and do that. If you look at answer C, we know it's not C or D because I just told you it's B. C, which is disk part, is to go and partition a hard drive, to go and subdivide it into more partitions or more sections. Answer D, which is IP config, is just to show you the most basic networking configuration on that specific device. It's going to show you the IP address, the subnet mask, that kind of information. Well, folks, we finally made it to the end of this video. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for supporting the channel. And speaking of supporting the channel, if you haven't done that, remember to give this video a like. I've put a lot of time and a lot of effort into this video. You wouldn't believe how long it takes to make these freaking videos. And if you'd like to know when more of these comes out or any of my other content, remember to hit that subscribe button. Otherwise, you're most likely going to miss it. And then the last thing or last few things I want to do here is just give a shout out and thank you to all the sponsors. So all of those Patreons that's been supporting the channel, thank you to each and every one of you guys. I appreciate your contributions very, very much. Thank you for keeping the channel going. For all of you that's been doing PayPal donations, thank you very much, guys. And then also to all of you that's been clicking on the thanks button below the video or that's just been doing random donations or giving me coffee. You can actually find those links in the video description down below. Thank you to all of you guys. If any of you guys would like to support the channel, you can find that in the video description down below. Speaking of the video description down below, you're going to find a very long list of all the questions. Every question has got a timestamp. So if you want to skip to a specific question, you go and review it or something. Each and every question has got a timestamp in the video description down below. And at the very, very, very bottom of the video description, you will find a Discord server link. So if you'd like to join my Discord server, which is called Free IT Training, it's completely for free. It's a community of IT people, like-minded people, which includes myself and people like yourself, which is studying for courses like this course. You're welcome to go and join it. So if you would like to ask a question about this course or any other course, you can ask it there. If you'd like to assist other people, you can do it there. So you also find me in that community. All right, guys, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I will probably see you on the next one.